Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Katie and I'm from Team NSBRC and I'm going to be facilitating on this afternoon's surgery. I'd like to welcome you all to our second session in our series of NSBRC online surgeries, where we're joined by a number of industry experts who are here to talk to you about all things smart home and home automation related. I'm joined by my colleague on camera now, the Centre's own technical expert, David Hilton, who's going to be your host for this session. He's also going to be providing an introduction to the lineup that we've got over the next few hours. And Dave's also going to be leading our hosted question time session that we've got on later today, where we're going to invite our panel of experts on camera to answer your questions. Now, before I hand over to David to introduce the upcoming sessions, I'd just like to briefly explain to you how you can interact with us over Zoom. So many of you will already be familiar with Zoom or have joined our earlier session this morning, but just to reiterate, in case you're unsure, we've got a Q&A function. Now this can be found at the bottom of the screen on the middle of the Zoom toolbar. So if you'd like to put forward a question to our presenters at any point, you can use the Q&A function to do so. We've also got a chat function on the right-hand side if you'd like to submit any other queries. So just to let you guys know that this session, all of them, all the presenter talks are being recorded, and we're going to aim to get these sent out to you by mid next week, just in case you're wondering. So now with that being said, I will hand over to your host for today, David Hilton, with his talk, Introduction to Smart Homes for Self-Builders. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the sessions, and over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Katie. Let me just get the sharing bits out of the way. And looking at smart homes, one of the first things that comes to mind is whether you're doing a new build or an existing home. We recently did a renovation, and now that we've all sort of sharing different facilities within the house, the whole idea of a smart home really gets stretched because we are using a lot of wireless, and I kind of think we should have perhaps done a lot more wired in the property, simply because we're finding that the bandwidth for things like doing these Zooms and things really gets stretched. So it takes a lot of planning because sometimes making these changes is quite disruptive. And when we look at the presentation for today that are coming up, it might be worth bearing in mind just a few ideas in your head, questions that hopefully the presentations will answer, simply because there are certain things that we didn't even think about when approaching our projects that really should have been thought about beforehand, things we didn't even think we'd ever need. I then look at and think, yeah, should have included them. Now, when we look at certain of the things within today, obviously the introduction by myself is going ahead now, but when we start looking at like at 2:30, I'm going to be quite interested to watch this, because home automation doesn't necessarily mean that everything is automated. There's a movie on telly we watched last week called Finding Alice. And in that one, on the first episode, her husband had built a so-called smart home, and they couldn't open the curtains, and she couldn't find out where to flush the loo. So it's all very well to have all of these controls and all of these lovely, easy, lazy things, but if you don't know how to operate them, that becomes a bit of a challenge on itself. And as far as I'm concerned, it was quite humorous actually watching that, because she was trying to find the flush for the loo while her husband fell down the stairs. So that became a little bit of an issue. And if you haven't watched it, sorry if I've killed that for you, but we don't know what's happening in the next one, but it's going to be humorous to see. And I also think about people like my mum. My mum's recently sort of decided that texting is a good idea, and she's just thinking perhaps WhatsApp is something to look at as well for being able to text for free. But telling her to use anything other than just a round dial to make things hotter and colder is just not going to happen. And sometimes adapting to different functionality is actually where the issue is. And we've found that it's quite a change to get used to things. As the simple things that we've put Ethernet wires into the existing part of into the new part of the property. We've added extra things like heat pumps and stuff to the home. So we have to have controls in every room. We wanted zone control in every room, but we couldn't disrupt the whole place by running new wires around. So there are wireless thermostats that go onto the radiators, for instance. We've added CCTV cameras on the front of the property as well, just because we know that people go past and it's better to have some CCTV rather than not have it. But how do you look at it? Do you access it from your phone, or do you just access it from a panel? How do you get hold of, how do you actually get hold of the recordings? Where are the recordings? Are they in the cloud? Are they controlled by another device that you then have to pay a subscription for? Now, moving on to the talk at 3 o'clock on MVHR, I think ventilation is something that we put MVHR into an existing house, which is mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. And instead of having trickle vents, there is a slow trickle of air through the whole house. And we've noticed this, especially this winter, when everybody's at home, we have no condensation on the windows, none whatsoever. It's simply the condensation is taken away. And you might think, well, I don't need to have that because I can open the windows. When you get to open the windows for the cross ventilation, by that time, the vapor that you've breathed out has already condensed in the property, and therefore you will find that it's already part of the fabric of the building. So you should take it away as you breathe it out. It doesn't mean that it's like a wind tunnel inside your property, but it just keeps it that much more fresh. And we have that slow turnover of air. It doesn't have to be fast. You don't hear it at night. It's not a turbine. But what you want to be able to do is also have some way of controlling that functionality, that it only goes into a boost rate when it's required. Now, if you connect it to your bathroom light, that would be one solution, but that means every time you go in the bathroom, even to have a glass of water or brush your teeth, the whole ventilation system will go into boost. So are there other ways of triggering it? And if you have some form of smart home device, you might have a motion sensor. You could then say to the motion sensor, which is what we've done, only trigger the boost when you've seen 3 consecutive minutes with movement in them. And at that point, it'll boost. And the moment it stops seeing movement from the motion detection, it will stay on for another 10 minutes and then turn off. And you can change all of that. And by having some form of automation, you can set it up that you're not just getting the stuff to react immediately. So connecting ventilation to a light is in my opinion, not the best way to do it, but have some form of automatic switch that senses when you need it. And I would be, especially in a new build, I would be including a mechanical ventilation heat recovery system, because you're filtering the air and you're turning the air over all the time, just slowly, but you are turning it over. So you're taking that moisture out of the property. It's also quite important to know how that reacts with the heating system. So I'm quite interested in waiting for that talk at 3 o'clock as well, just to see how it all links together and how other people are doing things, because how things link in with the heating system is quite important, albeit that they're acting independently. What you don't want is to overventilate when you're trying to heat your property, because then you're just trying to throw heat away. But if you have a good degree of heat recovery within that system and it's not running too fast, then you're recovering some of that heat, and therefore you're saving maybe 75% of your heating bills simply by recovering that heat if you're ventilating correctly. Now, when we look at 330, I quite like this. I want to see what this is all about, because I think everybody kind of aspires to having some form of home cinema, so that you can sit there with full surround sound and good vision and high definition. And I think it's quite important to actually get this right so that you future proof. you might not want it now, but in the future you might want something. And how do you then get the speaker wires to those positions? Do you run everything on Bluetooth, or is that the get out of jail free card? And I think this is going to be quite interesting to look at how you plan everything in with regard to the home cinema and TV and audio options. It's all very well to say, yes, we want Netflix, which is quite convenient at the moment, because then you can run Netflix or Amazon or whatever it is all the way around the house. But if you then suddenly think, oh, but I'd like to have Sky where I'm watching BBC One in all the rooms, can it be done easily, or does it need to be planned in? And if you change from to an aerial, can you then just say, actually, I want the aerial options to go to every room so that I can just use terrestrial. I don't have to pay a subscription for any of these packages, Sky, Virgin, whatever it's going to be. So I think future proofing is quite important. And we've also found that with certain TVs, we just find that some of them are easier to look at than others. And if you're also using the TV as a monitor, maybe there's something that needs to be looked at there as well. We found when we were trying to use the TV as a monitor using more zooms, it didn't work properly on all the TVs. Some TVs were better suited to it than others. So I think it's very important to get as much of this information together as you can, and then work out what is it that you're trying to achieve before rushing out and just buying the cheapest thing that you can find online. So plan things properly and speak to the guys that know. And I'm sure that the guys at Aperio will be able to answer all the questions that you have as well. I've had lots of conversations in them in the days when the center was open, just going through certain niggling questions that I've had, even for my own ends. Now, when we look at the 4 o'clock presentation, that is all about controls. And I've worked on a couple of projects that have had this NICO system in, and they're always changing things. And we've found that some of those controls, they'll have your heating in them. You'll be able to control your ventilation, you'll be able to control your lighting. In fact, you can almost control anything, and you can get it to send you text messages and do anything that you want almost with it. So by having the basics put into the whole house, the loom, let's call it, it facilitates you being able to make changes at a later stage because it's low voltage. Theoretically, you could have a light switch in the bathroom because it's low voltage. It also means if you move rooms around, you could change the functionality of the switches quite easily because the cables are taking data. And I quite like that idea. I like the future proofing of that, to say, well, actually, I used to have a master bedroom upstairs. Now we want a master bedroom downstairs. And I want to be able to open and close the roof light window from downstairs. Now you can add that functionality quite easily, rather than in the old days where you had to chase walls to put new wires in, or if you wanted to be able to operate a light upstairs or in a landing upstairs from a downstairs light switch, you can easily do that by just adding extra functionality to that switch. And I find that quite useful, that you can change your mind, because even doing a relatively simple extension that we did, there's things I would have done differently. And it would be lovely just to be able to add that in. And we're trying to work out ways of doing that. Yes, we've put in some form of wireless smart home system, and it's adding functionality to that to be able to get the result that we want. Now, don't forget that we've also got a question time coming up at 4:30. So throughout the whole of today, do ask questions. Send the questions in. Katie will see them. She'll try and pose them to the presenters at the end of their talk. But if there isn't time, we can also have them at the end. But do stay for that, because that's the time when we'll have all the guys, and that's when you'll be able to ask them the difficult questions that perhaps the sales guys wouldn't tell you. And we're going to try and end the session by 5 o'clock. So get those questions in early. I'll then try and manage them so that we can turn them into questions that perhaps combining 2 other questions together or add into them. But with all of this, try and get from it what you need. Think about, what is it that I actually want from my home? A smart home might be something you just thought, you know what, actually, I don't need a smart home. I'll just put lights in and switches and things like that. But where do the switches go? We had an an example where the electrician put in a switch for the telly to go on a wall up high, and all the connection cables were there, the HDMI, the Ethernet, everything that you could possibly think of, except the power plug. And he said, you didn't ask for it. And I was like, but how do you run a telly without it? So you have to tell them that you want power. And that is where the problem comes in. And then in one of the other rooms, we had all of it on the wall ready to go. And we thought, actually, we don't want the telly there anymore. We want it somewhere else. So we almost needed to put trunking in. And then you hang the telly on the wall, and then you've forgotten that you actually want to connect some cable to a Virgin box, because the Virgin box doesn't go on the wall either. So you almost needed to have put hidden trunking in as well. So pre-planning is great, but also put in something that allows you to change it at a later stage if you change your mind, because that is inevitable. Things are going to change. You think no matter how much planning you put in, you will change your mind at some stage. And start thinking about things like Ethernet, especially Ethernet, so that you can plug your computers straight in, and you're not then relying on broadband to be able to get the to be able to get the results that you want, because then suddenly all the kids are on the PlayStation, if you can get a PlayStation, that is, and you trying to do a Zoom, somebody's watching telly in another bedroom, Netflix, whatever it is, and you suddenly find that there's just everything starts spinning wheels of doom, and that's not a result you really want. But by having it cabled, at least you're not relying on the Wi-Fi. So cable as much as you can, just so that you haven't got those signals going around as well. We've found lighting. A lot of the switches, I would have loved to have had more switchability because it's quite open plan. You want to be able to turn lights on and off from different positions. So it's quite good to be able to put that in. Things like voice control can work. I'm not going to say the name of those devices, but when we start looking at those devices across the bottom, yes, I'd like to be able to control them from my voice. The problem is the kids know how to do that as well. Personally, I prefer to be able to just go on. I don't mind picking up a tablet or a phone or something and going onto it, but what I don't want is 60 different apps to be able to do 60 different things, because then you've got to log on to them and find them, and every time you change a device, you've then got to reload them, and the day you want it is the day that it doesn't work. You've also got to look at devices, because there's certain doorbells and things like that you think, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I can see who's at the door through my phone. It's only compatible with certain devices. So the word of this slide is compatibility. You've got your wish list from everything else. You've listened to all the talks. You now think, right, I know what I want. I'm going to go out there and get it. But make sure that you speak to someone who can make sure that it all works together. We've had a project that we were working on in Leamington Spa. The guys put air conditioning into the office rooms after the house had been built, and then they were complaining that the heat pump was running during summer. What was happening was he'd put air conditioning into the office room, it cooled the office down, the thermostat then turned on and turned the heat pumps on, and the underfloor heating came on. Then the room would be too warm, air conditioning would come on. So he was heating and cooling and heating and cooling. If he'd got the systems to talk to each other, that would have been great. But it was put in at a different time. The sales guys, all they wanted to do, they saw a sale coming along and they'd be just saying, right, I've sold the guy air conditioning. They go and install it. They're not thinking about anything else. You've got to let them know to say, make sure that it's compatible with everything else. And then when we've got these other devices, is whether it's going to be the Apple type ones or the Amazon ones or the Google ones, they all have their own compatibility. They will work with third-party devices. So yes, you could say the person's name and then lights will turn on and lights will turn off. But make sure that you haven't bought a Google device that you then want to operate from perhaps an Apple or Amazon device, because they're not always compatible that way. And that to me is a slight drawback. We've kind of gone down the Amazon route at the moment and everybody's got that, but I'm glad I don't have a child called Alex at the moment, because that might just throw things around a little bit more than they're currently being thrown around. So having names like that, and lights and everything being able to be turned on and off. What we don't want to do is end up with a situation where things are not compatible. And the simple compatibility is like the story I had with the air conditioning, but the more complex compatibility is you go and you buy a doorbell, or you buy a device that runs on a specific platform, and you've got to make sure that it's cross-compatible with the other platforms as well. So ask those kinds of questions as well. There will be other controls. We often have them. The obvious ones that come up within the heating fraternity are, I've got Hive, or I've got whatever it is. Is that compatible with thermostats? Yes, those things control your boiler. They don't control your room. So you need to work out, what is it that I'm trying to do? Am I trying to control just the boiler, turn the boiler on, turn the boiler off? Or do I actually want the bedroom at 18 degrees, the lounge at 21 degrees, and another room at 20 degrees, and have them all controlled precisely? So if that room turns off, the boiler doesn't turn off, the boiler stays on, but it's very, very precise. The old-fashioned thermostatic radiator valves, I say old-fashioned, they're non-motorized, they were very, very inaccurate. You turn them up, they allow more heat into the room. You then think, oh, the room's too hot. You turn it down a bit, and you're spending your whole life turning them up and turning them down. Whereas if you have motorized ones, which are totally compatible, you just take the old valve off and you put a motorized one on. It has 4 little batteries in it. Sometimes they have 2 little batteries in them, and then a signal turns it up and turns it down. You have precise control in that room, exactly where you want it. And you can also then tell it to be at different temperatures at different times of the day, which absolutely makes sense. If you're not going to use the room all day, why keep it warm all day? And that kind of brings us hopefully to a point where one will be ready to now hear what the guys have to say. And if one's got any questions already just on the bits that I've been putting together, then do let me know. But I think we'll go back to Katie now, and enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you at question time.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Dave. Because we do have a few minutes left until we've got our presenter due to come on. I just wondered if you might have time to answer a couple of the questions that we've already had submitted, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So one question that I've just picked out is sent in from Martin Sheridan. And he's written, automation is a nice to have rather than a must for me in the immediate term, but would like to future-proof to add in phases at a future date. What wiring would you recommend putting in, and how does this cost compare to traditional wiring?
I think that the guys presenting later will probably be able to answer it slightly better than me. But in our property, just to look at that, we've put everywhere where we're rewiring, we've put Ethernet cables in, which is simply the one that will plug into your modem, and then you plug your computer into it so you can get the data down a cable. So we've put Ethernet cables into it straight away. most tellies will take Ethernet as well. So if you're doing Amazon, all of that sort of stuff, you could put that in. Otherwise, I'd also be going with a Cat5 or Cat6 cable. I wouldn't go too much higher than that because it's very difficult to bend those wires. I'm open to correction on that, but I think I'd be putting in a bit more Cat6 cable than we've put in. And we've also put in coax cable, which is your TV aerial cable. We've put quite a bit more of that in, so that if we do happen to have an aerial connection from outside terrestrial wise, that we can actually get that to the house without and to the boxes without then nailing new wires on top of skirting boards and things like that. But there are ways. We've worked on a few projects where they've put in a cat cable loom as such, which might cost, I don't know, maybe a couple of £1,000, I would imagine now, but you can operate a lot from it, but it means that it becomes upgradable at a later stage. So it's future proofing. Once stuff's buried in the fabric of the building, it's almost too late to change it without disruption. So it's probably a question we'll ask again at question time, but I think if one's just looking at the basics, you want to be looking at Ethernet and Cat6 cables, just to be able to get that data. We're using homes in a different way. We're having home offices. And if you're in a property that could potentially be a family home, you've got to think that there's going to be potentially 4 people all using internet data. And you want to be able to use that without draining the Wi-Fi. So those basics are where it's at, I think, for me.
Okay, thank you. We'll just do a couple more and then we'll head over to Andy from Zone Your Home. So another one that we've had sent in is from Martin. It's a different Martin this time. And he's written in, any low voltage switches will be tied to a hub. What happens if the hub breaks, or even worse, the company closes? Would wiring lights and switches to wiring hubs where smart controls could be added be a better option?
I think that's a very good question. And it's one that I have asked before, because ultimately with these devices that I mentioned that have names, if Google disappeared, does that mean that all of those devices that operate on Hey Google, I can say Hey Google because it's the only one we don't have. And if that went down, does that mean then that all those devices suddenly stop? And I think I'm old fashioned in not wanting to have to pay a subscription for every single thing. Somebody recently said to me, why don't you go to Spotify to get all of your music? And I said, I've got 777 CDs or something like that already that are loaded on my computer. I own them. I own the right to them to play to myself. Why would I want to pay a subscription of £6 a month to listen to the music I already own? And I kind of think that sometimes with a lot of things, why pay a subscription if you can just wire something back to a hub and then connect it if you want to at a later stage. So I'm into the basics. I do think going back to a generic type hub that it has an open software in it, that is open to a lot of different people working on it, works. But I think perhaps asking the guys that later on, I think that's going to be another good question for them, because they deal with that every single day. I'm just the home owner. I don't see it from the supplier's point of view, but I like the functionality, but I don't like having to pay a different subscription for every single thing that I want to connect. So I do get worried that different software is going to go down, or they'll put up their price, or things will change. And I want the ability to change and stop paying rather than being held to ransom by these people that you've subscribed to.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I think we have time for one more quick question and then we'll move on. Yep. So this one's been sent in by Emily, and she's written, with a lot of things going wireless, for example, speakers, should we be putting more wires in new builds?
Wireless things still need power. So you've got to kind of work out how you're going to get the power to that speaker. So whether it's going to be filled with batteries or whatever it's going to be. I mean, do we want wired stuff? The best is wired. If you can plan in wiring, that's going to be the best. But if you can't put in wiring, then obviously you have to just go with wireless. But for me, wireless is a kind of get out of jail free card. And if everything's on wireless, there is the risk of interference, and it's a weaker signal. But Bluetooth and things like that, we all have Bluetooth on that we run music from and things like that. So it's not going to go away. And yes, it will get better, but I firmly believe that wired is always going to be better if we can.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Dave. So thanks for that introduction. So now if I could just ask you to stop screen sharing. And I will now invite onto camera Andrew Deeming with his 2:30 talk, Home Automation, Wireless Controls and Security Systems. Andrew's from Zone Your Home. So hello, Andy, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Just about to share my screen.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah, that looks fine to me. So I will let you crack on with your talk now. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Katie, and thanks, Dave, for that introduction. Actually, it's quite interesting. Obviously, the things that David touched on, and also the questions already. And I'll try and address some of those questions during my talk, because I think that it's interesting. Those what I think are some of the key things that we need to consider, or you need to consider when looking at making a home smart, whether it be a new build or a restaurant or a renovation. So yes, my name's Andy Deamy of Zone Your Home. I've been involved in smart homes for sort of nearly about 30 years now. I'm the technical director of lighting control companies, heating control companies, and for the last 6 years as the founder of Zone Your Home. So I've been involved in a number of different areas, including smart metering, energy management, trials with universities on smart home technologies. So I've split in a number of different perspectives. In terms of Zone Your Home, we offer systems that we bring all the things together in the home for both lighting, heating, security, networking, audio, visual, blind control. So we bring that together and make what we would call an interoperable system. David used the word compatibility earlier. We sort of think more of interoperability of how things work together. Now, also, we've got a number of talks this afternoon, so I'm not going to be covering all of those subjects. I'm going to be focusing on a number of areas. The first one is home networking, and touching on those things of what sort of cabling you should be putting in your house, and Wi-Fi, and what should you be doing about those sorts of things. Lighting design and control, and how we can control lighting, and what are the important factors there. Looking at wireless products, so different radio frequencies and products that you can put within your home. Touching on home security, and what's the art of the possible with home security. And I'm conscious that we have people joining who are looking at both new builds or retrofit. So I'll be also touching on what are the important things and how that sort of maybe contrasts. And then finally, touching on what to look for in a smart home system, and maybe covering some of those items, such as what happens if your manufacturer is no longer there, or what happens if the subscription stops, or the internet's not there, or whatever. So those are the sorts of areas that I'm going to be focusing on. So I think one of the things the last 12 months has told us, with working from home and homeschooling, and the rise of more and more streaming services with lockdown, etc., is that you need a decent home network. And irrespective of smart home technologies and control within the home, the fact is internet and good internet and Wi-Fi around the home is becoming an absolute critical thing for people. It's important not to leave it to chance. Design it properly and get the cabling in that you need for first fix. Prior to first fix, don't think of it as an afterthought later on in the project. It's a bit like other aspects of the build. You wouldn't build a house on sort of poor foundations. You need to get the foundations right. Another way of describing it is a bit like the digital plumbing, I suppose, is we need to get the cabling in correct for your future home networking infrastructure. In the same way that you'd use a professional for the electrics or for the plumbing, is you also need to say, let's consider this properly and professionally so that we get the right solution for the home. You're not going to want to renew cabling in 5 years from now. You want that cabling to be in there for the long term. So future proofing, which is a term that's already come up, is clearly quite important. Now, it's probably some of you looking at the picture there and seeing that large black fridge-shaped like device in the cupboard, saying, do I really need something like that for my smart home? And the answer is, well, maybe yes, maybe no. If you're looking at doing things such as bringing your audio visual, your set-top boxes, CCTV, and you want to put them all out of the way, then a multi-room audio with amplifiers, then you need to put them somewhere. So a cabinet such as that is a good place to put them. If all you want to do is have great Wi-Fi around the house and stream to TVs that are on the wall, then you don't need anything like that. So I don't want to feel that the talk I'm going to give is all about having a huge box like that, because it certainly isn't. But that's just an example, if you're looking at a full home entertainment system, how you could hide things away. I think when you do a major renovation, or you look at a new build, then this is your opportunity to hide all those wires away. So rather than that sort of bunch of spaghetti that sits behind a set-top box underneath the TV at the moment. Is this your opportunity to maybe put some of that in a cupboard and actually just have the TV on the wall and a nice clean installation? So I'm just going on about talking on further about the cupboard. Here's an example of a home hub that's been put into a kitchen cupboard. This was in a 2-bedroom apartment in London where there was limited space. So we used a cupboard, we pull the rack out and you can get toward things in it. The top half of that is actually about the networking, and the bottom half is actually running 7 zones of audio. So if you just want to do networking, you only need something half the size of that anyway. So I say that's really bringing it all together and making it compact in a cupboard. Also, those sorts of things often go into utility rooms. So we can put that away in a utility room if there's not room in a cupboard or a garage or a loft or a cellar. Okay. So what the slide's mainly about there is about the wide area network. So you need to think about what is your internet to your new home. Clearly, copper over BT is the most common one, but more and more fiber connections are being put in. If you've got a very poor satellite, if you've got a very poor internet signal, then clearly satellite or 4G could be considered. So, but it's also about future-proofing. What you have now at the property may not be the internet signal that you're going to get in 2 years' time. We've had customers where we put complete systems in. They only have in very rural locations where there's only a 1 meg connection. But then GigaClear came along within 18 months and put a 200 meg connection in. So suddenly everything we put in the house was suitable for the future network connection to the home. If you live in an area where you've got maybe a copper connection and that you don't think there's going to be much opportunity for a faster connection to get to your home, maybe you're a few kilometers from the exchange, then one thing you can consider is something called 4G load balancing, where your internet signal can be bolstered by 4G. So if your main copper signal starts to reduce, then you can top it up with a 4G dongle where required, and so that will give you a more consistent internet signal into your home. The other thing to consider is, if you're looking at bringing it all together, where is your router and your home hub going to be located in your new property or your renovated property? It's great, obviously, to have that maybe centrally located, but you've just finished your house, you've got this lovely new white rendered property, and then BT come along and try and put their phone cable at the side of your house. You're probably going to take the edge off it. So it's important to think about where it's going to be located and making sure there's a good access to get the internet connection into your sort of central hub. If you're looking at doing a smart home system where you're going to be putting a lot of devices on the network, whether that be cameras, TVs, multi-room audio streaming, set-top boxes, obviously phones and tablets as well, then you might want to consider investing in a better router than the one supplied by your internet provider. They're often built down to a price. They are getting better, but often you'll have this issue where they maybe need to be reset every week or two. Whereas if you have a better quality router, like the white product you can see, the white box you can see in the photo there, which is a Draytech router, which is used by many smart home companies. This gives you a much better signal. It's not a better signal. It gives you a more reliable and resilient network, and it's more suitable for controlling lots of different devices. So in terms of the network within your home, you need to think about how the signal gets around. Echoing what David said, I would agree that putting Cat cable within the property and putting those structured cables in is the right thing to do. We would say Cat 6 or Cat 6A as a minimum, which will effectively give you a gigabit Ethernet connection around your home, which will be adequate future proofing for many people. At the sort of I wouldn't say the cutting edge, but at the leading edge of smart home installations is fiber. So putting fiber around the property, which can give up to 10 gigabit connection, which for many people probably sounds excessive, but I'm just really showing what the art of the possible is. I would also agree that hardwiring as many devices as you can is best, even if we're going to have a really good rock solid Wi-Fi network. So TVs and sound bars, for example, all have a wired connection in the back, So make sure there's adequate connections. We generally put at least 2 data connections to every TV point, plus a third one for if you want TV distribution from a central point. So, there are a number of things to think about, and your smart home supplier will be able to do an adequate, proper network design for you, as well as a wiring schedule of all the cables that are going to be wired, so that it can be done in a straightforward manner. So we've talked about the home hub, and it's another example there. It doesn't have to be central, and the size needs to be dependent on what you're going to connect to it. On the picture there, you can see that there's different coloured cables for the data, speakers, and CCTV that go into the hub there. It can go, as I say, a number of different places. If you're going to have a lot of audio-visual amplifiers and stuff, then try not to put it in the same cupboard as your underfloor heating, because clearly there's going to be a heating load in there already. Generally, there's not any sort of, it depends what you're putting in there, whether it needs any sort of cooling, but usually not. But again, it's just a means of bringing everything together within the home. So just talking about Wi-Fi, one thing that a lot of people are surprised about when they do a modern new build is the extent to which the Wi-Fi signal is attenuated, and mobile phone as well. So you may have a great mobile phone signal outside your property, but as soon as you walk in and you move away from the windows, then the Wi-Fi signal, the mobile phone signal drops off significantly. So you may well find that Wi-Fi calling becomes pretty critical because you will not necessarily get a decent signal within a well-insulated modern building material new build. So because of that, it's important you have enough Wi-Fi access points, as they're called, which again are wired back to the centre. So all these Wi-Fi points are connected. As you move around the property, you'll be handed off from one point to the next. And if it's a properly mesh design system, then there won't be any data loss, and you will just continue your call or your streaming or whatever. If your property is of a very complex shape or large, then it can be worth considering having a heat map done for your Wi-Fi. So you can see on the diagram there, and the different colours really show the strength of the signal, the blue being the strongest, green being good, yellow being starting to become a bit marginal, and the 3 red and yellow dots you can see across the middle, which is where the Wi-Fi points are located for that particular property. So that's something to consider if you want to be really sure about that you've got the right coverage. For many homes, it's not absolutely essential you do that, and also with the experience of your suppliers may well be able to advise you anyway. But the thing is you don't want to, you're building a brand new, if you are building a new house, then why compromise with only 1 or maybe 2 bars of Wi-Fi in certain areas? You've got the opportunity to make sure you've got a strong signal in all areas of the property. One last thing, looking at in terms of sort of wiring and pre-wiring to think about is blind controls. We often find that blinds come a little bit late as an afterthought or a bit later. And if you want automated blinds, then best to plan it early. It's possible to have powered blinds, wireless battery powered blinds, or what blinds controlled over a data cable. And so clearly, depending on which of those options you go for, depends on which wiring you need to put in at first fix. If you've got very large open plan windows, or maybe floor to ceiling, or maybe you've done an extension out the back of to create a family room and stuff with floor to ceiling windows, then you don't really want to cover those up with blinds over part of the window. So it's possible to have your blinds set into the ceiling, like in this photo example, where you can see the blind and a sort of a white cover there, which sort of hides the access to the blind, and so they're completely hidden. But you need to get that built in at first fix. So you need to think about things like with your architect and building designer, if you're going to do things like automated blinds, is to actually ensure that's incorporated. Clearly, there's ways of doing surface mounted blinds later, but it's good to think of these things early on rather than before it's too late if you want to have it completely integrated. So moving on from networking to lighting control and design. Now, light design you would think is not strictly a smart home element. However, good lighting design will significantly enhance the look of the property. Layering of light to create ambience for different tasks and moods is important. And it becomes particularly important if you have an open plan property with cooking, the dining, kitchen, kitchen, dining, and family room areas that are very common in terms of extensions. In those sorts of areas, like this example here, and some examples of from our own sort of sites, is you end up with quite a number of circuits of lighting. You've got pendants over the kitchen island. There's some downlights for task lighting around the kitchen. There's some LED strip or point lights under the kitchen cabinets. There's pendants over the dining table. There's some wall washing lights in the corner. There's some table lamps in the family area. And so, you've got about 7 or 8 circuits of light there. So you don't want a situation where you want to continually go around and have to turn those lights up and down by switches. So you need to be able to create scenes such as a cooking scene, a dining scene, a relaxing scene, or watching TV scene. So you press one button and all the lights go to that level. So that's why lighting design is quite important, to get the right ambience and the right lighting, which you can then control as part of the smart home system. So as I say, it's about creating those tasks and those scenes, for different moods and tasks, and as well as controlling those. So there's a number of ways that you can achieve control in terms of a smart home. Clearly, there's from the app and from voice assistants and etc. We from our own point of view, offer systems where you can actually have smart modules behind the light switches, so you can actually create scene setting. So, for example, in the light switch there, where there's 4 switches, the 2 on the left are scene buttons, and the 2 on the right actually control the lights and dim them up and down in a particular area. So you can have a cooking or a dining scene, and then double clicking one of the buttons will actually switch all of the lights off in the whole area. You can obviously control it from an iPad, in terms of you can have wall mounts for iPads, like on the right-hand side there. And all those things are controlled from the smart hub that sits within the home. So, and again, coming back to sort of touch on one of the questions that was asked just before I started talking, which was, what happens if the smart hub goes down? So if you have a system where the modules are behind a traditional light switch and wired to the wiring that exists, then you will still be able to control those lights up and down from a wall switch on the wall. But your scenes, if the smart hub wasn't there or went down, then the scenes would stop working, but you still got control of your lights. So, there are ways of, by depending how you specify the system and what you do, to have that local control that isn't reliant on a computer or a smart whatever to work. Light control also gives you the option to bring in things like motion sensors to bring lights on in dressing rooms, hallways, bathrooms, and maybe bring them on bright in the evening, but bring them on very low at sort of 2 o'clock 4 o'clock in the morning, to bring them on at 10% and that sort of thing. So moving on to sort of wireless technologies. Again, coming back to one of my earlier sort of points, is that we believe interoperability is the key, and having an open system where you're not reliant on proprietary of one particular manufacturer. We use products that are based on technologies called Z-Wave and Zigbee, primarily Z-Wave, but with some Zigbee. They're both systems where there is over 3,000 products in each case that are certified to work together. So that means that we can get the best lighting control from a lighting control manufacturer, the best heating control from a heating manufacturer, and they'll work together on the same home hub complete together with no issues, because the products have been independently certified. There are other wireless technologies out there. As I say, these are the 2 key ones in terms of being able to get products that work together. They're two-way and they're secure communication. They'll work with a number of smart hubs. In terms of reps, the great advantage using wireless technologies is they're also suitable for retrofit solutions. So the product work, the wireless systems like Z-Wave and Zigbee work as a mesh network, so the signal is very resilient. It can hop back to the main controller. So whereas with something like Wi-Fi, which is a different frequency, it's point to point. So if you run out of range, your Wi-Fi runs out of steam, you need to put an extra device in to make the signal, to strengthen the signal in that area. With these sorts of controls, they work as a mesh, so the signal is routed from one to the next to get back to the central controller. So you already get strong range anyway, but it's very resilient, and it reconfigures. Both of them reconfigure. So you go and put a new fridge freezer in the way, then the signal will go a different route round to get back to the central hub. So clearly, wireless products are available for all of the main areas of lighting, heating, security, etc. I think one of the important things is that just because something's wireless doesn't mean that it's not wired. So if you look at the picture in the top right-hand corner, there's a picture of a dimmer module that's going behind a wall switch. It happens to be a circular European wall box. It happens to be a better picture, but clearly the same products are used in the UK in square wall boxes. So it's a wired product. You're controlling it directly. It controls the light directly, which gives you that resilience, but it gets its scenes and any programs from the central controller. You also have similarly, the thermostat in the top left-hand corner is a wired thermostat which gets its schedule from the central controller but reports back temperatures. On the bottom is a battery-powered wireless thermostat, which is a very good retrofit solution. This works well with underfloor heating as well as with radiator heating. It's a promotional shot there that shows the thermostat on a table. I would never suggest putting it on a table like that personally. The best place for a thermostat is on the wall, about sort of 1400 up the wall, so that you get best temperature measurement within the room. So, but again, it's an example of a wireless thermostat. The little product in the middle is called a smart implant, and I'll just touch on that later, actually. With all this products in your home, a lot of them will measure temperature or energy use and report that back to central control. I won't dwell on this too much because I think Moss Technical are going to be talking on this later on, so I won't sort of go too much on this. But here's an example of some data that we've collected, and it's very interesting in it, particularly if you are looking at sort of passive houses, or you're looking at, or energy efficiency is very important to you in your house. This is very good data of understanding how your home is operating, and you can see over a 7-day period at the peaks of the graph at the bottom, and you can see how the long slope down, which really shows how the temperature within the room, and bear in mind this can be one of these for every room. You see how the temperature of the room is decaying over time, and that's quite interesting, particularly understanding how well insulated your home is. Is it doing as you expected? And for example, we're using this in a consultancy basis with customers with passive homes who are discussing their building performance with building designers. Moving on to security, clearly it's a big area. Security's been around, CCTV and gate entry systems for a long time, and alarm systems. And it's possible to put new systems in if it's a new build, and we'll talk about some of the important aspects of that. IP-based systems is one of the key things, so that you can talk to it and again integrate it with things like with other parts of your system. So if someone presses the intercom button, we can bring lights on, send an alert, and obviously the intercom can be answered anywhere in the world, and you can open the gates from anywhere in the world. You maybe be looking at a retrofit situation. You already have an alarm system. Well, the little product at the bottom is known as a smart implant, and that, for example, can be put into an existing alarm system, and that can then send signals to your lighting and heating, and will send you alerts. So you may have what you think is a not very smart alarm system. We can make it smart and make it send you signals and alerts that the alarm's gone off, whether you're home or not. Similarly with CCTV, IP base is important. You consider integrating with light control to bring lights on. Things to consider is about recording locally to the cloud. Already been comments been made about the cost of subscriptions to the cloud. And the fact is it's another weak link, not necessarily weak link, it's another link in the process. We all generally look at recording locally within the home, but clearly you can access that video anywhere that you want. There are lots of features in modern CCTV systems, such as virtual tripwires, like on the photo there, but you need to use them with caution, because there's lots of things that can set them off, and you can get to a situation where you're constantly looking for things that aren't really there. So there are ways of doing things that's important, but it needs to be used with care and needs to be used in a cautious way. So sort of moving on to really just talking about smart home systems and selecting them, and I think some of these points again, people are already touching on these. Personally, I think interoperability is key. you need to be very sure and certain about what you're doing if you're looking at a long-term investment and you're relying on either one manufacturer or one infrastructure. So you need to make sure, evaluate that, and to make sure you're comfortable, and do your due diligence to make sure that you're happy with the sort of mix of products being put in. Is your home to be controlled from within the home or in the cloud? Again, if the internet goes down and you can't control your home, then to me that's an issue. We always recommend control within the home first, and then the cloud is sort of an added benefit. Is this something that you want someone to do everything for you, so it's all been configured, set up, and you just use it and live in the house? Or is this something that you actually want to maybe have a supplier do a system which can then be handed over, and then you can then change those settings yourself and upgrade that yourself and manage it yourself? From our point of view, that's something that we offer both of those solutions. When we hand the system over, we back it up to the cloud, so it has a backup, and there's a backup copy. So if the homeowner then makes changes and there's issues, we can then just reload it back to how it was. Similarly with support, it's clearly important that you have adequate support, and that support happens in a timely way. So we always advocate the fact that can your system be supported remotely, and can upgrades be done remotely, or how are software upgrades done? How secure is it, and what methods of security is there? What happens if there's no connection to the internet? And also to ensure that you've got all of your sort of documentation, passwords, system layouts, and etc. Handover. So there's quite a number of things to consider. I think there's lots of reasons why people want to invest in a smart home. For some people, it's a fun factor. For some people, it's about energy saving and about things working together so that you can get more out of you. The sum of the whole is more than the individual parts, if you see what I mean. It could be from a security point of view, and I think it's important that whichever of those routes you go down, that the solution's tailored for you. And I like to often think about it. It's about making the home work for you. So it's not always about reaching for your app on the phone to do things. It should be that things happen scheduled. Your lights come on, your heating is scheduled at certain times. If you're away from home, certain things happen. You get alerted if there's anything to be concerned about. So it's about getting that sort of balance, really, and about making sure that what is done suits you, that it's future-proofed, and then available for you. So. Katie, that's sort of me just sort of wrapping up, unless there's any questions or.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Stop sharing, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. If you just like to stop sharing, then you might be able to possibly switch your camera on just while we cover a couple of questions. We've got 2 minutes left. Lovely, yeah. I can see you now. Fantastic. So we've had a question come through from Thomas, and he's asked, is there a risk of overloading a circuit with this large hub when retrofitting?
Not really, no, because all of those, like the network switches and all that sort of thing, actually take a very low energy use. We particularly specify ones without fans, so they don't consume a lot of energy. We're very concerned about energy efficiency. If you're looking at things like CCTV and audio, then clearly they can use a little bit more energy, but even then, it's not as great as you think it's going to be. So yeah. It's not so much an issue. It looks like it would be some huge thing with all those flashing lights, but actually, it's not what you think in terms of power consumption.
Great, thank you. So I'll just do one more question. This has been sent through from Laura, but we've had a couple of questions come through just about security. So she's written, how secure are security products? How do we protect them from being hacked?
So the key thing is you sort of your password protection, and well, there's a number of things. Is it secure within the home, and is it secure outside the home? So one of the reasons, for example, we use that Draytech router is that it's also a security firewall, which is regularly updated, which gives you very, very strong protection. And there's a lot of things you can do in terms of a lot of functionality there that we can add in terms of security. So one thing is protecting your home network, and therefore things in your home network are therefore protected. The second one is in terms of sort of password protection and things like two-factor authentication. So again, it's backing that up and making sure that you've got strong passwords clearly, and all the usual things that people say these days. But that really is a lot of it, and making sure in terms of critical things, making sure there's, for example, CCTV, that there's always a backup password as well, so that because you can have a situation where it just locks it out completely. Because the idea is, if someone continues to try and hack it, it will lock that username out. So we then have a backup one. So there's things we do to make sure that it's resilient and secure. Really, it's difficult to show. You must need to show examples, but we recognise the importance of security within the home these days. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time there, Andy. And we will see you again at question time at 4:30 today.
No problem at all. I'll stop sharing.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So now I'd like to welcome to join me on camera Brian from ADM Systems, and his talk is why mechanical ventilation and heat recovery is important and how it interacts with heating systems. So I shall ask you to come on camera now, Brian, and we can start screen sharing. So you're just muted at the moment, so you'll need to switch the microphone on.
Okay, we there?
Lovely, yeah, I can hear you. So I'll just be here until you've got your screen up and running, and then we'll get going with your talk.
Okay. Let me go back, sorry.
Yeah, you just need to come off of that. I think what you're doing is sharing your Zoom screen. So if you just get your PowerPoint one up. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay. Thank you very much, Katie. Hi, I'm Brian Singleton, ADM Systems. I'd love to say reporting from sunny Northumberland, but it started raining about 3 o'clock this morning and it hasn't stopped since. So it's pretty disgusting up there. I hope it's better where you guys are. Also, the guy over my right shoulder in the painting is our Labrador. The postman's been, so I'm hoping that there's going to be no canine vocal interference over the next half hour or so. Thank you very much to David and Katie, and particularly David, thank you for the introduction where you mentioned MVHR. I think you covered quite a few points that I'm going to be covering, so maybe if you could send me an invoice that, and we could come to support or some separate arrangements for that. But thanks very much. So what I want to talk about the importance of MVHR, not only impacting on heating systems, but where it fits in with the whole fabric first, building airtight, ventilating right. So what are the key components in a thermal strategy for your build? Where we fit in really, and something that our clients say to us when we are able to speak to you guys at shows, fabric first is the way people are going. So the major investment really should be in the fabric of the building. So whether you're looking at conventional building constructions, SIPs builds, ICFs, even if you're doing a renovation project, you know, the major investment should be in the fabric first. That's the forever bit, you know, that's the bit that has to last for a long time. Obviously then insulation is something that comes into the next part. So most people are renovating, certainly in new builds, insulating to way in excess of what the basic current building regulations are in the UK. And then very important is airtightness following that. So, you know, investing in the fabric, investing in your insulation, air tightness has to follow that. That comes in the detail. The 10 versus 6, what is the 10 and what is the 0.6? So just in terms of air tightness, basic building regs, so just to get your basic SAP, your basic building regs for a property in the UK at the moment, you only need to achieve an air tightness of 10. So forget what 1 is, or 0.6 or 10. Higher is worse, lower is better. So just to give you an idea, if you did a pressure test on a house that was a basic building regs of 10, they have a pressure test device called which sucks air out of the building until it gets to a 50 Pascal difference, and then it comes up with a figure. So for a 10 house, if you were able to add up all the leaks in the house and measure them, in terms of its size, that would be something like an A4 sheet of paper throughout the whole house. A passive house, it would measure at 0.6. The equivalent of all the air leaks for a 0.6 passive house is a 50p piece. So you can see there's absolutely enormous difference between basic building regulations and something like a passive house. Now, I don't guess that most people are looking to get the passive house accreditation, but one big message that we get is people want to get close to that. And the projects certainly we're involved in are getting very close to that level of air tightness and that accreditation. So given that fabric first insulation air tightness, that then impacts on the heating and the heat demand you need for the building. So if you get those first 2 or 3 components right, then what you need to heat your building will be very, very small indeed. We've been involved in passive house projects. Some of them only require something like 2 kilowatt of heat to keep that building warm all year round, including the winter. Ventilation then becomes a big part of that, and it may not be uppermost in your mind, but it has to work with all of the other issues. So all of these things are component parts. They don't necessarily are joined up in terms of actually talking to each other, but they all need to be complementary to each other for a house to work. Why do you need to ventilate? In an airtight house, up to 35% of the heat loss can be contributed to the ventilation. It is a requirement, so you can't do nothing. Part F of the building regs in England and Wales and Part L cover ventilation, and the equivalent in the Scottish Domestic Technical Handbook. So you have to have a level of ventilation now to satisfy those regs as a basic. And the other thing, and I think this has been highlighted over the last year or so, indoor air quality is really important, and condensation control is really important. I'm really pleased to hear David say that the system he has in his house, his MVHR system, really controls condensation, and no evidence of any condensation damage. So we spend 90% of our time indoors, and maybe that's going to increase a bit in certainly the foreseeable future. So it's important that the buildings ventilate correctly. So is MVHR the only option? Well, no, it's not. And I just want to run through with you what the basic building regs are, probably what you shouldn't do if you're going down the route of renovating or self-building to a highly insulated airtight solution. So these are extract-only options. So windows, so it's worth dwelling a little bit on this. Opening windows is not does not satisfy the regulations alone, but even in an airtight house, even in a passive house, opening windows is part of a ventilation strategy, more so for summer purging, i.e. when the building's overheating. Nothing happens to a controlled ventilation system when you open windows for a short period. But the point is, you can't rely on windows solely to satisfy regulations. There's 3 other approaches I'm going to cover England and Wales, but they're pretty much the same in Scotland. And these are extract only. So system 1 are your bulk standard intermittent extract fans in bathrooms, en suites, utilities, WCs, etc. Passive stack is a non-mechanical system, very, very rare in certainly self-build. And I understand it may be a system that may be phased out of the regulations, but it's still in there. And the other system 3 is central extraction, or fans that are running all of the time in the bathroom rather than intermittently. Unfortunately, with all of those approaches, you need to have makeup air. So if you take air out of a space, whether it's a bathroom or whatever, you need to replace it. So with those extract only options, you must have trickle vents in your windows for makeup air. That is the regulation. Trickle vents are just going to contribute to like cold air coming in. You're going to feel a little less comfortable. I'll show you, the effect of that in a couple of slides time. And the tendency is, rather than you have a stable temperature, you're going to have peaks and troughs of hot and cold, and you're always going to be having to turn your heating up, or your heatings are going to have to react to cold air coming in. So the impact of or the trickle vents, or the calculation for trickle vents in a domestic property, and this is just a sample size property, which is probably an average self-build, some are bigger, some are smaller. So what they calculate is an overall area expressed in square millimeters of trickle vent size throughout the house. Now, these can be bigger in some rooms and smaller in the others. So in Part F, if we take Part F for England and Wales for System 1 and 2, for example, the overall free area of square mil is 170,000 square mils. That sounds a heck of a lot. But if you translate that into, say, a letterbox, which is, say, 250 by 40 mil, the equivalent in letterboxes you're going to put through your windows, mainly, or patio doors or whatever. In England and Wales, it's equivalent of 17 letterboxes. Plus, you're going to penetrate your building 4 or 5 times, depending on how many extracts you've got, and then you've got a thermal bridging issue. So going back to the fabric first insulation air tightness approach, that really doesn't particularly stack up. Now, System 3 in England and Wales, you can reduce the number of and size of trickle vents. But to me, it doesn't make sense to reduce openings that allow your property to breathe if you are building very, very airtight. So either way, none of those 3 options really stack up in terms of you being comfortable and your heating system working as little as it can to keep you comfortable. So here's a little some slides of some pictures of the impact of trickle vents. So this is where I live, in a place called Newbiggin by the sea. That's my dog. I'm standing on rocks. I'm not in the sea, but the tide's out. These are some new houses built opposite where I live. I live just the back of them here. So when the showroom opened up, we went and had a nose like you do. And that's a picture from the first story, that they're townhouses which overlook the sea it was a former school site. So yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant view, and the next landmass east is Norway. I have a thermal image plug-in for my phone, so I took a picture of that window. This house is non-MVHR, extractor fans and trickle vents. So I'm sure most of you understand thermal image. Red is warm, blue is cold. This was actually in June, but you can see the weakness in a extract only approach in terms of the air makeup through trickle vents. This is a snapshot I took this morning. Appreciate it. It's quite small, but this is the weather currently where I live. These houses are about 100 yards away from where I live. So that's the BBC weather forecast for this afternoon. So around about now, it's 4 degrees and there's 94% humidity. So what's happening is in this house, it's been extracted. I don't know if they're intermittent or permanently extracting fans, I can't remember. But the air coming back through here is 4 degrees and 94% humidity. David alluded to it earlier that, you know, if you allow that high humidity air in, it's going to get into the fabric if it's not extracted from properly. So it really doesn't stack up. And yeah, just a sort of amusing little slide from our favorite movies. You've put a big hole in your building and you're letting a lot of heat out. So mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, how does it work and what are the benefits? I've got a short video to play for you, 2 short videos, just to give my voice a rest and you a break from my voice. So this will describe nicely how MVHR works. And the second video, just about 30 seconds. Okay, so just to reiterate some of the things on the short videos there. So MVHR, it's not a heating system. Yes, sometimes heating can be introduced to top up. There are products on the market which are MVHR and heating combined. If you're looking at that route, you really do need to have a very detailed room by room thermal analysis. But most MVHR systems are standalone, which complement the heating system because you're recovering up to 90% of the heat from the outgoing air. Neither is it an air conditioning system. There are some tempering products around which may offer some proprietary cooling throughout the house, but it shouldn't be conceived as an air conditioning system. But the balanced controlled whole house ventilation system, constantly extracting from the wet rooms in your house and supplying filtered air, so your fresh air from outside is filtered, the stale air is exhausted to the property. There's no mixing of air whatsoever. The only thing that is transferred is the heat from the outgoing air to the incoming air. So there's a bit of a scientific slide on how that works. This is the sort of dummy of a heat exchanger, which would be inside an MVHR unit, showing the efficiencies that can be achieved. I'm not going to dwell on that too much because I think this is the most powerful thing I could potentially show you. So again, we've got this snapshot I took of the house, which is 100 yards away from me. You can probably see a bit clearer up to about 3 o'clock. It's 4 degrees and it's 88% humidity. So that's in the non-MVHR house. That's what's happening. Warm air has been drawn out and cold, very cold, wet, very high humidity air has been drawn in. This is a snapshot from a client's MVHR unit in Argyll and Bute, a place called Inellen, which is near Dunoon. I have his unit on my phone because he has a unit which has an app which enables me to do that. And I don't interfere with his unit, but it helps with diagnostics and things like that. And he's okay for me to share this. But I don't know if you can quite see that, but the extract air going out of the system, out of the house, so that out of the bathrooms, etc., is currently in his, well, sorry, it was about 11 o'clock this morning, is 20 degrees with a humidity of about 47%. The exhaust air, that's the air going out of the system after the heat exchanger, has dropped to about 7 degrees. The outdoor air, which is similar to where I am, the outdoor air is 3 degrees and it was at 96% humidity at about 11 o'clock this morning. And here's the important thing, the supply air after the heat exchanger, so after the process, no other input whatsoever, is 18.4 degrees and its humidity is 36%. So really safe humidity levels. And his heating system, and he has a very, very small amount of heat for his house and a very low running cost, is only having to compensate for about a degree as opposed to the non-MVHR house, which would have to compensate for 16 or 17 degrees. And I think that's probably the most powerful way to demonstrate the difference between MVHR and not. So I'm conscious of time. There's a lot I could talk about. I just want to run through the how we go about this, the design process, which is pretty much based on drawings, floor areas, volumes of houses. So it's pretty easy to get an initial estimate for a system going. Once you've done that calculation to satisfy the building regs for wherever you are, you then pick a bit of equipment which is capable of doing those airflows. We are independent and have choice. Some people may be just tied to particular products. So it's then choosing the components, choosing the ducting system. I don't know what system David put in. This is a radial duct system. This is probably becoming the norm. These are individual pipes. They are a lot easier to get around, certainly in renovations, certainly in builds that have posi joists, absolutely easy. You can see how easy it is to work with other services like electrical and plumbing. Some companies use I-beams, but again, with adherence to notching guides, that is doable. So radial duct systems are probably the most popular and the better ducting systems to look at. There's still branch ducting systems, which are UPVC pipes or galv ducting based on a branch system. But I think what we do at the moment, we'll probably do about 90% radial and 10% branch ducting. Certainly don't use flexible ducting because this is what can happen with it. It just gets kinked and then it starts to affect the performance of the system. The lower the system is running in terms of its percentage, the better it is for longevity of fans and running costs and of course noise. Any system anybody supplies to you should have attenuation built in. Controls. So David mentioned controls earlier. With MVHR, there's a lot of options. I'll put this slide up, although it's specific to one manufacturer. It pretty much covers most manufacturers. Some will have some of these connectivity features, some won't. So some things are wired, so you can have switches, LCD controls, switches. You can have units wired to light switches, but as David was saying earlier, I would agree with that. That's not a great solution. The whole premise of MVHR is that it runs continuously. You're getting a constant flow of air out of a bathroom, an ensuite, a utility room, and obviously into the supply air rooms as well. There are ways of boosting the system. So most product has an inbuilt humidity sensor. So you don't need it to work off a light switch. If you're going to have a bath or a shower, then the humidity sensor in the unit will potentially increase the flow of the unit automatically without anybody else having to do anything with it. But if you want other remote switches or sensors such as motion sensors, CO2 sensors, they are all doable with most manufacturers' product. This manufacturer has an app. I showed you a screenshot of that app earlier. Some manufacturers won't have this. The older generation MVHR units won't have this. It is wired, so it doesn't wirelessly, so it's hardwired in and then connected to your home network and is a standalone app. And this particular manufacturer also has potential connectivity to building management systems. Would really need to talk to whoever you were looking to use that, and probably Andy and Nico could probably guide more on that, on the protocols they would need from the connectivity of the MVHR system. But all of these things are possible in terms of controls. Rattling on to just to get designs done, we need a bit more information in terms of joists, etc. 3D models are all good. This enables your MVHR designer to do a pretty accurate design using CAD, 2D or 3D. This is a 3D image where we can overlay designs over joists so everybody knows where things are running. And more importantly, or just as important, alongside the design, there should be a project-specific air change schedule. So just quickly, installation. You consider it early. Here's a good example of that, where it was a SIPS build with a lot of steel. So working with the people quickly and early in the project, we're able to get the structural engineer to agree holes through steels. This is a really complicated floor zone, but it's a good example of a client engaging early. Just consider where the units can go. This is in a dedicated sort of storeroom for the MVHR unit. This is in a loft space. Plant rooms, utility spaces are all options for MVHR units, or even if you've got a really tight space like that. I'm going to whiz through to the end because we're conscious of time. You must get your systems commissioned and balanced. So whoever you deal with, make sure that they're able to do that so you can have it balanced to the design airflow schedules. So my advice is to start early, engage early, strive for air tightness and efficiencies, and get a design done so you can get that signed off with everybody in the process. Thanks for listening. I think I almost bang on half an hour. Don't know if that leaves us with any time for questions now, Katie, but I will be around for the rest of the afternoon.
Lovely, thank you very much, Brian. So I think we've got time for a question or two before we invite Chris to come on camera. So one question that has come through is, bear with me one moment, let me just clicked off it. So this one's from Wasim, and they've sent in, for a property which suffers from condensation / high humidity, what are the pros and cons of using a PIV system, and would a dehumidifier be a better option?
I'm guessing that's in an existing house. PIV has its place. It works on pushing air into the property and then finding natural openings. So if you've got a leaky old building, then PIV may be a really cost-effective solution. If you haven't and you've improved windows, insulation, air tightness by any means, it may not be the best solution. You could have a slight risk of pushing the moisture into the fabric rather than out the building, but you would just need to maybe send the project through for somebody to assess to see what was the best ventilation approach.
Lovely, thank you very much. So we've had quite a lot of questions come through on typical costings. So you might be able to generally advise really, but one particular question that we've had come through relating to costs is from Greg, and he's put, what does a typical MVHR system cost for that typical 4-bed house cost to buy and run? Sorry, I can repeat that if you want. I sort of didn't say that very clearly.
Yeah, a typical 4-bed house. It's not always the easiest to say, because I have 4-bed houses which are 180 square meters, and I also have 4-bed houses which are 300 square meters. They may have lots of reception rooms, but assuming it's sort of around about the, say, 200 square meter mark, which is probably about right, 200, 220 for a 4-bed house. The sort of more basic MVHR manufacturers systems will probably kick in at about £4,500 supply only. Running costs of these units are pretty small. I mean, I would expect somewhere in the region of 50, 60 watts. If you calculate that to a day, you'll probably get almost 1 kilowatt hour cost per day. So it's whatever your cost of electricity is, 15, 16p per day to run an MVHR system.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Brian. It's a really great talk. So we'll have to move on to the next presenter now. So we've got Chris from Aperio. So if I could just ask you to stop sharing your screen there, Brian, and I will invite Chris to join us on camera for his talk. It's going to be on home cinema, TV, and audio options and considerations. So Chris, hopefully you'll be able to join us. I've now made you a co-host. Lovely. I can see your screen there. Are you able to? Oh, there we are. I can see you now.
Okay, excellent. Can you hear me as well?
Yep, I can hear you just fine. I'll let you crack on. Thanks very much, Chris.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you to everyone who's attending for taking your time out today, and the NSBRC for inviting me to come along and present as well. So I'm going to give a basic overview about Aperio, what we do, and then go into a little bit more detail on some of the subjects. So what we're going to cover is who are Aperio, what do we do, pre-wire planning, smart home, multi-room video and audio, home cinema, some example projects, and then quickly go through our showrooms. So who are Aperio? We started in 2013, but prior to that, I was contracting for a number of companies doing installations and programming. And that's me in the bottom right-hand corner before lockdown, when the hair could get cut. So the hair is a little bit longer and bigger now, as I'm sure it is for everybody else. We are specialists in all aspects of smart home and home cinema, and we are an NSBRC partner since 2014. And we've been in the Pot and Ruskin show house since 2015. So the big red brick houses you walk through the main front doors. We have a certified Control 4 showroom. So in a certified Control 4 showroom, there are limited numbers in the UK. We have to adhere to strict standards. We have constant training. We can be visited on jobs. So we are in kind of like a the certified area, so we need to make sure that we adhere to their standards. We're a small family-run business, and we're very personalised in the service we provide. So it's me you deal with kind of from start to end, from the initial phone call, meetings and emails, through to the quoting and even the installation and handover. So you might get to see too much of me potentially if I'm involved in your project. And because we do such personalised service, we do get lots of repeat business for customers and referrals as well, which is great. Some of our achievements over the year: a couple of years ago, a project we were actually involved in with Potton was Potton Best Home of the Year Award. A couple of years ago, we did a lot in that property actually. We did full pre-wire, lighting control, audio throughout the property, video throughout the property, the network, so a complete wired and wireless network. And what was interesting on this project as well was the lighting was so, the budget at the start didn't allow for the whole house of lighting, so we did about half of it. And then a short while later, we actually added additional lighting circuits in, purely because the fact that the client actually really liked the lighting we put in, the full mood lighting with scene control, as opposed to the switches and dimmers, which she didn't like as much as our lighting, which was great. I love that. I don't know whether you can see my pointer, but I love the star just inside the front door on that wall. And then one of the cinema rooms we did was in Home Cinema Choice magazine. That's a seller. I'll go through that project a little bit more later, but that's a great room, as you can see. Great place to watch Shawshank Redemption, along with other things. So what do a peri-audio visual do? We can be involved from pre-wire planning, which obviously we need to get involved as early as possible with that to make sure the correct wiring infrastructure is in place, which I'll go into again on the next slide a little bit more. And then if the pre-wiring is correct in place, then that helps with obviously everything that's involved in the smart home side of things, such as mood lighting, window treatment, so motorized blinds and curtains, multi-room audio and video, which I'm going to touch on again later, gate entry, and much more. So we can cover off lots of stuff with the smart home side of things. Obviously, wired and wireless networks is quite popular for us at the moment, with everybody working from home because the current pandemic and schooling from home. More streaming services puts more stress on a network, and making sure you get good whole home coverage so you don't get black spots as you walk around the house. And then home cinema. So pre-wire planning. So a common question we get is, isn't everything wireless now? And yeah, to a degree, wireless is better, but if you can wire something, it's the way to go. So not everything is wireless. So for example, if you put speakers, in-ceiling speakers around a property to make things discreet, they need to be wired in. TVs still need a coax cable and things, and power, because even things that are wireless potentially need power anyway. And the biggest thing is wire is more reliable. And we have this kind of thing, if it doesn't move and it needs a network connection, plug it into the network in particular, rather than wireless, because it's just more reliable, it's faster, it's consistent. Why should we pre-wire? Again, a very common question. You need to think about what you want to do now as well as in the future. So if you think you want to have audio around the house, video around the house, lighting, network's a big thing, making sure you've got network points dotted around the house. Because if you've got a big property and your telephone point comes in where your router is in one corner of the house, as you go around the house, that's going to drop off. So you want to have a good wired infrastructure in, because you can put wireless access points on the end as well. And it's more cost effective at the moment as well to do it when you're building, because the electrician's already pulling in power cables and various other cables to pull in additional network and communication cables. It's the best time to do it when everything's open, because you don't want to build a beautiful house and then having to start chase out walls to put cables in or run them around the outside of the house. Things, it's getting that infrastructure in early. And it actually adds value to a property now. We're finding people, especially developers we're working with, are saying that people are asking whether properties have been pre-wired especially for network, because everybody has said is starting to work from home now and everything's going online. You get fridges that connect online, kettles, everything. So the sort of things you want to pre-wire is TV, audio for speakers, video around the house, and network's the big one. Lighting, if you're thinking about having mood lighting, blinds and curtains, because you want power to those as well as communication, motion sensors, security, electric gates, and it kind of goes on. That example there, the picture you've got, that is actually a job we did for a property developer who wanted to ensure the house was well connected. It was a nice property, and when he sold it, he wanted to make sure that the person that was buying it had lots of choice and option for them, because it was a high end, finished really well. So they wanted to make sure that the house was smart and future wired. And that's all part of our site pack. So we do a complete site pack with floor plans and wiring schematics where all the cables are labelled, and it stays with the house. And again, using this as an example, this site pack was handed over to the buyer, so the buyer could see exactly where the house had been pre-wired for speakers, network, blinds, cameras, etc. So it's something to do, because I said it's quite cost effective. The cost of cables or big drums of cable isn't expensive, and it's worth putting them in. So smart home, what is a smart home? So the idea of a smart home, people think, is it going to be complicated? It's actually going to be more straightforward and easier to use than probably what you're used to now. Using a home cinema or a living room as an example, you've potentially got a remote control for the TV, a remote control for a sound bar, an amplifier, a remote control for your Sky box, a remote control for your Apple TV if you've got one of those. So you've got 4 remote controls there straight away. Well, one of the things we do, using that single room as an example, is give one remote control to operate all of it. So whether you're turning on the Sky box or the Apple TV, it would select the right inputs, so change it to HDMI 1 or HDMI 2, and then you can control the device you've selected and use one remote control. So it does make it nice and easy to use. And as you add more, or depend on what you've got in your smart home as well, if you've got lighting, audio, video, cameras, you can put that all into a single pane of glass. It's kind of a common saying. So instead of having an app for your lights, an app for the TV, an app for your music, an app for your heating, you put it all onto one app, so you can see at a glance what's going on in your house. So you can see again from that screenshot, it works on lots of different devices, where you've got your own tablets and mobile phones, you've got remote controls, you've got portable touch screens, you've got touch screens that go on the wall and on the TV screen as well. And it's a common interface, so you can select music and everything from these interfaces. And you can control it away from home as well as at home. So if you're running late, you can quickly connect up, turn on some lights, perhaps turn the heating on and close the curtains, or just check in on the cameras. It's just one nice, easy way to use it. And you can set up alerts as well. So if the doorbell goes off, it'll ring through to your phone, or you can make it alert you or turn lights on. So everything kind of starts connecting together. And with the lighting, again, using that as an example, we work with a lighting designer because lighting is so important. But you can have one button that does all off, so it dims all the lights in the house or switches them all off and leaves 1 or 2 on when you leave the house. We know kids have a habit of leaving lights on upstairs. You walk out, get in the car, look up and see a light on. So you'd have to then run and switch off. You can, with the all off, you can make sure those lights go off. You can do logical things. So at night when it's darker and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you need to visit the restroom, instead of the light coming on at 100% and blinding you, it can come on at 25%. So again, it doesn't distract you, it doesn't brighten in your eyes, and it also doesn't then distract the person who may be also in the room. And it just gives you an overview of the whole house of what's going on. Some of the things we've done in the past and doing is we're doing controlling someone's pond water fountain through the Control4 system. And we've done one in the past where a client had a ground floor flat that he stayed at weekends that flooded. Lucky enough, it's ground floor, so nobody else was damaged, but his was gutted. But what we did, we put control on his main water supply that came into the house, so it stops the water, because I think it was his washing machine that flooded, or I'm not entirely, can't remember, it was a couple of years ago. But it just gives you that level of control. And more manufacturers as well are supporting Control4. So for example, LG, Panasonic, Sony, using TV manufacturers, they have Control4 protocols inside them. So they connect up to the system really easily and really well to give you great control. And they all just talk to each other and trigger various actions. So it can be extremely straightforward to use, but very, very powerful in what it does. Garage doors, gates, everything. So it's very, very flexible. And you can build upon it as well. It's modular. You can start small and get bigger. Multi-room video and audio, again, is something that's come in quite popular. And the big reason for that is people want the kind of clutter-free, minimal look in their house. They don't want little units of speakers dotted around on top of bookcases or on tables. And the same with TVs. People just want a nice clean TV on the wall. They don't want all the boxes and units underneath it or tucked down the side. People just want a TV, a remote control, make it extremely easy to operate. And then all the equipment can then go in a plant room. So everything operates from there. And once it's there, you can then distribute it throughout the house. So depending on where you've got speakers and TVs, you can have those sources shared everywhere. And with the in-ceiling speakers as well, they're discreet because you don't generally look up at the ceiling, and they can be much better quality than a unit that sits on the side. Gives you a nice spread of sound as well. So if you've got a little unit that you sit on the side, the person sat nearest it is going to be loud, and the person sat at the other end of the room is going to be quite quiet. And if they're having a conversation, it's going to be quite hard. Whereas if you've got it in the ceiling, it's a nice consistent sound across the room. And it's easy to operate in terms of if you've got music on a phone as well, you can share music into videos, and you can do party mode. So if you're entertaining, not that we can do much of that at the moment, but if you're entertaining, you can play the same music throughout the house. So if you've got an open plan kitchen, living, diner and garden, you can be playing exactly the same music throughout as you walk through. So it's all completely seamless. And the same with videos. If you're watching perhaps a sporting event and you're walking between the kitchen and the living room, you can put it on both TVs exactly in sync in terms of picture and sound. So you can just walk around. But at the same time, you can play separate things in separate rooms as well. And you can actually also allocate. We've done jobs where perhaps they've had 2 or 3 sky boxes. They've allocated one of the sky boxes for the children's room and another sky box for the adults' room only. So you can allocate devices. So next thing is, what is home cinema? So that's one of the kind of big topics that we wanted to cover off today. One of the things it's not is it's generally not a package deal you buy online for, say, £500 from a online seller or a high street store of a projector and screen, for example. That's not going to give you a great experience. And a cinema in a box from your high street retailer, again, so such as the soundbar, 2 wireless speakers and a wireless subwoofer, they're great to a degree, and they serve a purpose, but it's not going to generally fill a room with sound. You're not going to kind of feel it, so there's no impact in the sound. It's not as immersive, it's not as all around you and it's dynamic and detailed and giving you a full frequency response. And they're very often sometimes not very clear. So when you've got vocals, it's sometimes hard to hear what people are saying, especially with people nowadays. Seems to be the thing that people want to mumble with in films and make it a bit darker and deeper. It makes it harder to hear. But you want to make sure the speakers are in the right place, and when you turn these up loud as well, it will end up distorting. It won't sound very clear. It sounds screechy, and the sound just won't be great, along with the picture as well. So what is a home cinema? So a home cinema can create an immersive experience. So it's effectively bringing the cinema home. So you can have the big picture that really brings the content to life. So whether you're watching a nature program, a concert, a sporting event, it just makes it so much more immersive and interactive. It's impactful. So if you're watching a big blockbuster and there's lots of explosions and bangs, being able to feel them as well. So whether you feel them through the seat, whether you feel it through your chest. I don't know whether people here have been into our showroom at the NSBRC and had a demo there. I think the majority of people that have enjoyed the experience and the look and feel of it as well. The sound makes such a big difference in being able to hear everything, and it's the level of detail and accuracy of the sounds as well, and having, as mentioned on the last slide, having clear voices. And when you can turn it up as well, it doesn't get kind of harsh and screechy. So we can reach kind of reference levels, so extremely loud, and keep it accurate and detailed without any distortion. You don't realize just how loud it is until you pause it, and then it's really quiet, and then you press play again. It's so loud, but you don't realize when you watch it how loud it is, because you don't have the distortion. It's nice and clear. So we design a cinema for you and your room, taking in various elements. Why have a home cinema? A common misconception is that people think can only watch films on it. Basically, especially a projection-based system, that's what people think. You can use it for everything you use a regular TV for. So whether you want to watch Scarnet, Virgin Media, a Blu-ray, streaming, so Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, a games console. We've got quite a few customers that are big gamers that play their games on it, so you can effectively connect any device to it. You can watch sporting events and concerts and all the latest releases. You can spend time on your own or with your family. We have lots of clients that have it as a big place to relax and recharge, that have got stressful jobs. They just want to go and watch the latest box sets away from everybody else, and just relax and get away from their phone and everything that's going on, especially at the moment, because life is stressful at the moment and people are spending more time at home. And cinemas are temporarily closing. Hopefully they're reopened, because they are still a great experience, but we don't know. And more films are going straight to streaming. So Mulan, Trolls, Soul, Wonder Woman 1984 came out, I think, on Christmas Day. So lots of films are now going straight to streaming it and bypassing the cinema. Box sets, you can't get the cinema. So Game of Thrones, The Crown, The Mandalorian, lots of other things. If you can watch those at home on the big screen like you would at the cinema, rather than just films, it's brilliant. Some of the box sets are so well produced, and the sound and picture quality is superb. So having them on a big screen is just really, really involving. And the nice thing is, compared to a cinema, you can pause for a break. So if you're watching a 3-hour-long film and you're drinking your Coke or your coffee or your beer, you inevitably will need a break. So you can actually pause it and go and have a break without worrying about missing anything. And also, you don't have the distraction of noisy packets. I don't know why cinemas have rustly bags of popcorn and sweet packets. When you put your hand in, it just rustles through the whole cinema. You can recreate that at home if you want, but you can avoid that. And you just lose yourself in what you're watching. It's emotional, and people get goosebumps from it. Very often when we're demoing to people and they're watching it, you can see they're totally immersed in it. And then when we stop it, they kind of jump as if to go, oh, well, I've just kind of come out of whatever I was watching and getting involved in. So it really does kind of give you goosebumps. So some of the considerations, especially on the room side, is the size, the shape, the layout, the acoustics, the decor, the flooring, the furniture, lighting, windows, doors, reflection seating, sound insulation. Not everybody has the perfect shaped room and the perfect room. But these are the kind of things that we'd consider when we're looking at putting a cinema room together for people, because we want to give them the best possible experience you can in their room. So we take all these kind of things into account and work with you to get the best experience. From an audio perspective, so some considerations and requirements from an audio perspective is the number of speakers, their type and placement. So on the right-hand side there, you'll see a few different layouts. They're all based around the newer formats, which are Dolby Atmos. So I put the logos at the bottom. You might be familiar with the bottom left one, the blue one, but the black and white one is actually the new one. Sorry, the blue one's the older one. So when you see that, so audio traditionally comes around you at ear level, which is your normal 5.1, 3 at the front and 2 more rear. And then one subwoofer. With Dolby Atmos, you have sound over the top of you as well. So again, we've got it in our demo showroom at the NSBRC, but when it's raining or a helicopter flies over or something like that, instead of it going around you, it actually comes over the top of you as well. So again, it just gets sound all around you. You do see people looking around. And again, with the speakers, we do kind of in-wall, on-wall, in-room. In-wall is quite a common one because we want to make it as discreet as possible. When you're watching a film, you don't want to be looking at the big speakers. You want to see the image. That's what you're watching, and hear the sound. And our speakers are very often hidden behind the screen and an acoustically transparent screen to let the sound through. And then the subwoofer placement's a big thing as well, because bass is incredibly hard to control because the big slow waves. So you could sit in one place and it sound great, move a meter to the right and there'd be no bass, and a couple of meters to the left and it's really bassy. So again, it's thinking about those kind of things in the room. So the number of speakers, where they go, there's kind of a lot to go into it to give you a really nice, consistent, balanced sound throughout the room and get you really immersed in the audio. And then from a video side of things, so an image side of thing, there's the TV versus projector argument, or discussion, which we very often have. And it's a lot of that boils down to the room and how big an image you want. If you've got a bright room with lots of windows and glass with lots of light coming in, a projector won't generally work in there, because you need a really dark room like the cinema, because you're reflecting light off a screen on a projector. So any light that comes in will wash it out and make it grey. So that's a very important consideration to have. And then we look at the things like the screen size and the resolution, HD, 4K, UHD, 8K. 8K is being discussed, but not much to it at the moment. Aspect ratios, so 16:9 is a traditional TV size, and then you've got your 2.4:1. So when you watch films on your TV, you'll very often see black bars at the bottom and top. So if you had a 2.4:1 screen, you can have a bigger film screen without the black bars at the top and bottom. And then we take into account the viewing distance, how far away you're sitting, and then whether you've got a fixed screen on the wall or drop-down screens, whether it's a dual-purpose room or a permanent cinema room. And then we look at things like the material and the gain. And you can see from those images there, the gain varies. And we look again into the room, because if you've got a bright room, you will reflect things that are there, so it will wash out the image. You can get ambient light rejecting the screens, but they are a little bit of a compromise, but they are good. And there's a lot more to images than the pixel count. Just a very quick story of a client we had that when 4K came out, he was, I must have 4K, must have 4K. So we did a demo of a 4K projector and a HD projector in 2 different rooms. We didn't tell him which one was which, but one projector had much better contrast ratio, much better colors, but the other one was 4K, so had more pixels. So he watched both of them. We said, which did you like best? And he preferred the HD one because the colors. So the pixel count is important, but you're not really going to benefit from the pixel count unless you're sat quite close on a really big screen. The colors and dynamics are very often more important. If you can get a combination of both, which you can now, then you can honestly get some stunning pictures. So what do we do in terms of a home cinema? We design a calculated solution. We look at the room and the room considerations, going back to the previous slides in terms of audio and video. We choose the right speakers from the room and their optimum placement. We choose the right screen, the size, the format, the type, the attention to aesthetics, furnishings, lighting and acoustics, choosing the right projector, so brightness, resolution, contrast ratios, and we install and calibrate it to get the best out of the system for you. Because it's all very well putting the system together, but it then needs setting up and calibration. When you go into a high street store, John Lewis, Currys, when we could, and you looked at the TVs, the brightest one's always one you look at, because your eyes are very often attracted to bright lights, or they are attracted to bright lights, so that they put them really bright in the store. When you get home and set up the TV, one of the first questions I ask you, are you using this at home or in a shop? And the reason for that is because when you use it at home, they turn the brightness and everything down and make it more normal, because you go into a shop when there's a football game on and they're actually playing football on a luminous green grass, which I've never played football on a luminous green grass. Yeah, it's a selling point to make them nice and bright. So I'll just go on to a couple of jobs we've done just to kind of show you different things that we've worked through over the years. This one here was, we talked about to the client about having a multi-channel system, so a full surround sound home cinema setup in there. But once we went to the property and had a look and discussed it, and he was very much into his 2-channel stereo music as well. So he wanted something to cover both. So the sofa that's underneath the TV had to stay. That was a big point of discussion, but it had to stay because it's a sofa bed for when they've got guests. The husband lies on the sofa on the left-hand side with his head on the armrest, and the wife sits pretty much where this picture is taken from. So that was their seating positions, and that's why we worked through it, taking everything into account, and they wanted something discreet. We did say about colour matching the speakers, but they actually wanted to keep them that colour. We put the cabinet, the stud wall in to recess the TV and to sink the speakers into, and we built the cabinetry in the left-hand corner. You can see one subwoofer, but that system sounds stunning and looks great. It's got an OLED TV in there, and it's got a huge sound stage. After it'd been in for a few weeks, we went to see him, and he just said he's so pleased with it. He said it's great for TV, great for music. He said the level of detail is brilliant. The vocals, so when he's listening to music or a concert, he said it's like someone's actually in front of you, rather than coming from the speakers. It's like they're right there. So that was a great setup we did there. This one is a before, just to clarify, that's a before picture. So basically nothing worked on that one. As you see, the screen was halfway down. There's a TV that's lopsided. There's a sound bar that's sat on top of the amplifier. Nothing worked, hard to operate. They just gave up on it and said, can we help? So we ended up doing this for them. So a nice big projection screen, a bit of Toy Story. Everyone loves Toy Story. You got the two subwoofers on the floor below the screen by the cabinetry, which has got all the equipment in. And most importantly, everything works. So they've got one remote control to operate everything. It's for the children's playroom, so it has to be easy to use. We've actually combined it with Alexa as well. So sorry, just checking my Alexa didn't wake up. I'll mute that. So they can go in and say, Alexa, watch Sky, and it will turn it on to Sky, put the projector on the amplifier, the Sky box. So it's easy to use. It was built into the wall as well, so it looked nice, much more room filling and impactful. And there is a big sofa bed, so like a big Super King 4-poster bed in there that all the kids just lie on and watch TV of an evening and weekends. They have their friends around when they could, and apparently it's a very, very, very popular place to be. And apparently all the kids want to go to this house so they can watch it, so I think that's great. This one was a dual purpose room. So this was a second kind of living room for the property. They had another living room, but they wanted a room that was quite formal and nicely decorated, but at the same time, they wanted to use it as a cinema room as well. So the end of the room around that window, you'll see there's custom cabinetry all the way around, and there's a kind of a pelmet at the top, which you can kind of make out. Then there's blinds inside the glass on the window, and you can see the black meshing on the front of the cabinetry is where the speakers are. So when they want to watch a film, that's what it turns into. We obviously normally have the lights on, but to take a photo, we put the lights on as well, so the lights be off. So again, they're really, really pleased with that. We added the lighting control onto that one as well to make it nice and easy to use. And the wife's actually part of a book club, so they read books, and then once all her and her friends have watched or read the books, they go back to the house and watch the film. Very often the book is better, which is quite a common thing apparently. This room is a existing client we did a cinema for, so I'm aware of time, so I've only got a couple more to do. So this room was a existing client that moved into a new house and did a loft conversion. So this is a loft conversion, this one. He did a lot of the work before he actually contacted us to say he'd moved house. So he just contacted us. I said, I've done a room, can you move all the kit to it? So we moved all the kit over into that room. You'll see the screen's got a yellow tinge to it, and that's because the screens reflect the light. So that's why it's yellow, because it's reflecting the sofa on that particular one. And we did upgrade on that one as well, because we installed his original cinema probably about 6 or 7 years ago. So we did upgrade the audio and video on that one. And that's what it looks like when the lights and everything off. And I don't know what that Tom Hanks film is, actually. I'm sure someone does. But yeah, that's a really nice room. He's really pleased with that. Funny story, when we were running the demo with it, when we first set it up for him, he's got a unit on the back of the wall with glasses on. And when we left the room, one of the glasses actually fallen off onto the floor. Lucky enough, he had deep pile carpet, it didn't break, but he had to put something along the front to stop them all falling off. Next one, only 2 left to do. So just very quickly on this one, this was an unused living room for a client. They've got an open plan kitchen, living diner with a big TV on the wall. So the living room wasn't being used. They went to an Airbnb that had a cinema room, which they absolutely loved. They contacted us. We did a demo, came over to have a chat. And this is what we ended up creating. It's a great room. It's nice and dark in there, but interestingly enough, the client didn't want it to go dark because she didn't want it dark and dingy. But in the end, she absolutely loves it. She loves the fact you open the door, so really dark, and it's a really impressive room, and they have friends and family around. This one has been in a few years, so we can say that they did have friends and family around. Client's always is also a massive F1 fan, so he's actually got a racing seat and pedals and steering wheel and everything, and he plays his PlayStation on it, and it's brilliant. He loves it. He's like a kid in a toy store, so it's brilliant. And they have friends over, and funnily enough, we're actually talking to their friends about doing a loft conversion for them. So hopefully that will come off as well. This is pretty much the last one. So that's the one said down in the cellar. So it's a new house build. So we started from scratch with that one and worked through that. So no windows or anything in that. So really nice start room, perfect. We also connected up the son's DJ equipment because he's a teenager. When he got 3 teenage sons, they like partying, hence the pool table. So we connected that so they can do all their DJing and party down there. And actually from where that photo was taken, there's a wine cellar in the corner. So they've got everything they need down there. And then just quickly, showrooms. I'm sure some of you probably already have been here or met me here. But yeah, please come along to the NSBRC and have a look at our showroom in the Potten House. There's no better way to experience what smart home is and home cinema is without coming in and having a look. You can go along at any time when NSBRC is open again. But if you want to make an appointment with us, and I can have a demo with you and show exactly how everything works. So that's a great place. We got all the lighting in there, multi-room audio and video, motorized blinds, different keypads, everything in there. So that's a great place to come along and have a look. And then for those of you that are really thinking about having a home cinema, then we have another demo facility where we have a couple of projection-based demo rooms. That room on the right-hand side with Nemo on actually has a much bigger screen in there now. But yeah, again, that's a dedicated cinema facility that is a one-to-one appointment only. So we can spend as much time as you want there and go through as much as you want. It's quite a good fun day to have over there because it's dedicated to a few cinema rooms and there's music systems over there. And it's things you wouldn't have heard and seen before that just sound phenomenal. So we would really welcome you to come along and have a look. So we've made it to the end. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I hope everybody found it useful and interesting. And thank you for the NSBRC as well for inviting us. And I think we've run out of time to do any questions. So I think we'll probably do them at the end, perhaps, Katie, I don't know.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much for that, Chris. That was really interesting. So in about half an hour's time, we'll come back and do the hosted question time session. So anyone who's submitted questions for Chris, we'll come back to them shortly. So thank you very much. I'll just ask you to hover in the background there, Chris, until it's time to come back on. And then I will welcome on the next presenter. So we've got Andy Moss from Moss Technical. So Andy, hopefully you can hear me there. I'm just going to ask you to...
Yes. Oh, hang on, I've got the wrong
come on to
camera.
Anna, if you can share your screen for us, please.
Yeah, hi Katie, and thanks for that, Chris. Very interesting. So I'm going to present lighting, heating, ventilation, shading, and energy control. So I'm going to take you back to the basics, really, of what we like to call the modern electrical installation. A lot of people do call it smart home or home automation, but we prefer to look at it as if it's the new way of doing it, the new electrical installation, because basically wiring hasn't changed for about 40 years. We still wire things exactly the same as we have done in a lot of cases, but of course that is inflexible. The light switch only ever operates the light. It will never do anything else unless you put an interface on, a wireless interface. So if you're doing an extension, then you've got an opportunity to run new cables, and so there's a different configuration. So I'm going to take you through a presentation now in a second. Some of the slides you may have seen before, but then I'm very quickly going to get on to the basics to give you a good sort of overview of the concept of smart home technology, and hopefully then that will open your minds as to what is possible thereafter. So like I said, I'm Andy Moss. I'm the UK distributor for Nico Home Control. Nico is a smart home installation. The company is 100 years old. So it's got a great pedigree, reliable. I heard David talk earlier on about longevity of of product. And you know, obviously there's a lot of new stuff coming onto the market these days, so that is, you know, it's inexpensive, which is great, and it fills a lot of retrofit solutions. But if you are building a home, or you're rewiring, then these are all things you need to take into account. I've been in the industry since 1987, so nearly 35 years. Started off as an aircraft electronics engineer, but then started the business as an electrician, a self-employed electrician. So I've taken it from the basic electrics into the smart home, and of course, in my opinion, there's no way else to do it, no other way to do it these days. Of course, you're going to select all the advanced systems that are on the market, the best of everything, whether it's HVAC, MVHR, heating systems, and everything else. So then my question to you is, why would we ever consider putting the old configuration of cables in the property? So I'm going to share my screen now with you. Just bear with me. Here we go. And just going to presenter mode, so hopefully you guys can see this. So let's take it back to the start. I assume you can all see that. There we go. So we started off with the simple wheel brace for drilling a hole, and of course now we've got the cordless power tool, which is what we all take for granted these days. Of course, technology's moved on, and we do take that for granted. Of course, if we look at the cars and the automotive industry, well, we wouldn't expect to buy a car these days without certain functionality as standard. You know, power steering, parking sensors, automatic wipers and headlights, and that's because the market has driven it this way. The same for mobile phones. Of course, we all have smartphones these days, and we expect to just pick them up, and whether we're sending a text or making a phone call or a camera to take a photo, we use that same user interface. So technology's moved on massively, and it's continuously evolving as well. If we look at the Pope's inauguration in 2005 to 2013, well, you know, it pretty much speaks for itself these days. People don't watch the event, they watch the screen that they're holding up in front of them because they like to record it for some reason. So they sort of miss out on the actual event itself by just watching their own screen. And so therefore, this has led to a very common occurrence that we see. We see this all the time. You know, people living their life on their phone, but of course they're not just chatting. They're emailing. They're doing all sorts. And it's this one user interface that is what we all love, and we wouldn't do anything other than that these days. You know, if you lose your mobile phone or you damage it, excuse me, it's like you've cut your right arm off. So many businesses have been affected as life's evolved. The music industry, we tend not to listen to vinyl these days, although there is a place for vinyl and it's coming back. It's making a big comeback. But CDs, obviously, some people, I noticed David earlier on mentioned that he had over 700 CDs. That must have cost an absolute arm and a leg back in the day. But nowadays, for a small subscription fee, and I'm not a lover. I'm a northern lad, and I'm not a lover in constant subscription. So yes, you do need to select a system that doesn't give you ongoing costs. But I think I draw the line, and I'm more than happy to pay a few pounds every month to have over 15 million tracks available to me when I want them. And that's the same for video or movie subscriptions as well, because you know we no longer go to the video store to rent a video and take it back the next day. Times have moved on, so VCRs have now become online streaming. And although I'm not going to be talking about the infrastructure of the TV distribution, obviously the previous guys have mentioned that already, and that's a huge factor in getting the cabling right. But excuse me, it's all part of smart homes. Excuse me. So also how we use our transport, how we get from A to B these days. Sat nav makes it a nice, quick, and energy efficient and comfortable route to get from A to B. The modern technology diverts us around obstacles, and obstructions and delays. And we no longer have to get our AA roadmap out on the steering wheel while we're trying to find an alternative route just because we've come across traffic. So technology and music, transport, and of course gaming has moved on. I remember back in the day, Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Space Invaders. Well, now we've got this immersive world, and in order to play these games, we need the infrastructure that will allow that. That's the network, the Wi-Fi, and it has to be of a particular internet speed. Of course, when internet was first launched, we had dial-up, and now, of course, we've got fiber. So this has all led, this is where I'm going with this, because this has led us to need to really seriously consider the smart home or home automation installation as the modern electrical installation, that it needs to be wired in this new configuration. So industry and society are setting these new expectations. Aging in situ, as we like to call it these days. Everybody wants to sort of live a long and comfortable life in their own home. Of course, care homes cost on average between £600 and £1,000 per week. So if you're considering a smart home installation, that can be the difference of living an independent life in your own home for a bit longer, maybe another couple of years perhaps, before if you do need to go into care. Now, of course, if you've got a better quality care home, depending on the part of country that you live in, well, that could be, tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds potentially if you're in there for a long time. So what's a few extra £1,000 on a modern electrical installation on a smart home at the start when you're doing your new build? Of course, the IoT is big these days. It's a network of interconnected computing devices that don't need that human interaction. Things like your fridge, your washing machine, all these things are interconnected these days. Your little robots, hoovers, or lawnmowers even. They're all connected on what we call the Internet of Things, the IoT. And of course, they can all play a big part in your smart home installation. So they need to be connectable. And of course, energy, how we use and save energy these days is a really big factor. Control and safety and comfort. These are all things that people are willing to invest in. Of course, your kitchen, your curtains, your carpets, and your furniture is really important, and people are prepared to spend on that. But you wouldn't build a house without putting decent foundations in, because of course it'll come falling down. You've got one chance to get your cables and your infrastructure in place, whether that's ventilation systems with pipe work or whether it's cables. Now, of course, with any smart home installation, it is a different configuration of cabling. So these are things you really need to consider, and make sure that you've put the budget aside for it. A suitable budget. And maybe if you don't have the correct budget at the moment, then maybe future wire it, or maybe hold off the landscaping. It's not for me to tell you what to spend your money on. But of course, there are going to be things that you can add later on, but you've only got one chance to get the cabling correct. And these are trends that we see happening all around us. We're living in this connected world, and those trends have impacted housing expectations. And hopefully you'll see as we move forward the magic behind all of this. So I'm going to just go through how we do this. If we take the traditional light switch, this is a single item. This is a single switch that we press the button and it makes a contact, and there's no way of separating that. It's very cheap, but it doesn't meet today's needs. What if we could split these? What if we could disconnect the button press from the actual operation of operating the light fitting? We can do that very easily by putting a brain in between the button and the circuit itself. So if the controller is the brain of the installation, that manages the whole installation. So the relationship between the button and the light is programmed in the controller. Now, this could be a dimmable lighting circuit where if you press the button in the evening, the light comes on at 100%. But if you press the same button at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you go to the toilet, the light then comes on at 20%, because the controller knows that it's that time. So we've detached the connection between the button and the actual contact itself now. Now, this could either be as a single unit, or it could be a detached situation where you've got all the modules in a central point and then the wall controls actually in the room. But of course, this can now give you maximum flexibility. The outputs that were going to be controlled don't just, they're not just limited anymore to switching contacts for lighting. You can operate dimmers and shutters, and why not heating, ventilation, or music? Or why not a combination of these? So you push a button. I think one of the previous guys presenting mentioned creating a mood. So when you press a button, it sets the lights to the right level, maybe closes the curtains, turns the heating up, and maybe puts your music at a particular level, you know, your favorite radio station or a particular playlist. And the way we do that in reality is we have what we call a bus system. Now, the bus system goes from the central point, the brain, or the controller, in other words, that radiates out to each of the switches or the controls throughout the house. And you notice those are all on the same cable. Once the controller receives the message, the button press, then the controller tells the relevant modules in its location in the central point. I like to think of it like a bicycle wheel where you've got the hub and the spokes, and the controller and the modules there that you can see. These are the hub of the wheel, and then the circuits become the spokes. But of course, it means now we've got central control of absolutely everything. In reality, this is going to make quite a big saving on switch wire cabling. There's no cabling between the operating points and the circuits themselves anymore. It's a simple cable that just goes from the controller, and it daisy chains throughout all the controls. But then we take what I referred to previously as the spokes of the wheel, the circuits now, from the controller to the ceiling lights in the living room, and then the controller to the wall lights, and then the controller to the coffee table lights. But of course, when you're taking into account the cost, the overall cost of a smart home, we need to take into account this saving of cabling and the fact that we don't need to buy the switches. There's no additional cabling for thermostats. There's no additional cabling for motion sensors. So although a smart home installation is going to cost you a little bit more than, or it is going to cost you more than a conventional installation, the benefits thereafter massively outweigh that cost. And of course, the cost becomes the difference between the smart home installation and the electrical installation. And this is it in reality. If we take some software to set the installation up, you'll see here that we're linking these players, as we call them, the outputs or the circuits. And this is an example of an all-off function where one button as we go out of the house, out of the room. And it's also linked to a switch either side of the bed. So we've got three-way switching, but the little action there, in the middle of it, links all these lights and the dressing table light as well. So a push of a button turns everything off in that master bedroom. And it's not just about clever switches these days. Of course, smartphones, we live our life on our smartphone. We can control our installation from the within the home or anywhere in the world for that matter. And of course, a couple of trade names there, Amazon, Alexa, and of course Google. Oh, my Amazon is, my Alexa's just decided to wake up. So voice control. Now, you know, some people don't like voice control. They don't like the concept of it, but that could be a huge factor in later life if mobility becomes an issue, to be able to control your home by your phone or by your voice, you know, rather than have to get up and close the curtains or operate the lights. So these are all things that are going to make your life living much more comfortable later on. But are we ready for home automation? Well, there was a book written back in 1946 by a gentleman called Geoffrey Moore, and that was the book called that he called Crossing the Chasm. And the thesis was quite easy, quite straightforward, in that technology is, of course, rapidly accepted by an audience of innovators and early adopters, but there is a big gap before the wider audience accept it and adopt it. So, of course, home automation has been indeed, it's been around for many years, you know, probably 30 years, but it's always been considered for luxury homes and those with lots of money. But we are seeing, we are now on the other side of this gap. the technology enthusiasts and visionaries at the early market, you know, this was where the main market was primarily the traditional wiring installation. But of course, now we've got the pragmatics. And of course, you guys who are watching now, you are within this category because you're only watching this because you're considering it, and which is great. So we're at that mainstream market now, and the very fact that property developers, volume builders, are installing smart home technology as standard in their installs gives us a huge message that that this is the way forward. You know, there's no going back from it. And like I say, if you look at cars, you wouldn't expect to buy a car nowadays with the technology in it that that was in there 10 years ago. Times have moved on. So what can we do? Well, if I give you a few examples now, we like to think of these as building blocks. And of course, you don't have to go for the entire wish list at the start if your budget doesn't allow it. If we look at the comfort aspects of it, we can control with a smartphone or tablet remotely from the home. We can create moods and scenes, you know, so, and these moods and scenes don't just need to include lighting. They can include shutters, heating, music, basically anything to soften that mood as you see fit, and all at the touch of a button, or it could happen automatically at a particular time. For instance, when I disarm my alarm system, when I get in, if it's in the daytime, it just disarms the alarm. If it's nighttime, as in early evening, certain lights come on the ground floor. But if I come in at, say, late at night, 11 o'clock, when I disarm my alarm, it only brings the table lamps on in the hall at 50%, but then it turns the landing light on because it knows that that's roughly what my routine is at that time of day. So instead of the lights coming on at 100%, they can come on much lower. We can automate shutters, curtains and sun blinds. Of course, that gives us that element of comfort because we know it's going to happen every day. But of course, that gives us a security element, because if we're not in the property, which we'll talk about shortly, closing your sun blinds and your curtains automatically when you're not in makes the house look lived in. And we can do those individually per room, or we can operate them collectively in groups very easily. We can integrate motion sensors, and the motion sensors could then maybe act as security sensors when you're not in the house. We could have a motion sensor when we walk into the bathroom, that if we walk into the bathroom in the evening, the motion sensor picks us up, the light comes on at 100%, and the ventilation system boosts 3 minutes later, for instance, if we're still in. But if we walk into that same room at, say, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to go to the bathroom in the night, the ventilation system isn't affected at all, but the lights only come on at maybe 10%. So we can program this so the house starts to think for itself. And of course, you can integrate other systems in your home because, of course, we are living in this connected world. We might want the Hoover or the Roomba, for instance, if I drop a brand name in there, the automatic Hoover, to hoover the house, but perhaps only if we're not in. You know, we don't want that action to happen when we're in the house. So of course we need to integrate it with the act of us going out, so that it knows that. And of course a smart home system can do that. And of course we can control our heating efficiently, and we can influence it. Again, when I disarm my alarm system, for instance, at say 6 o'clock, if I get in, only the ground floor rooms are already nicely heated, but the upstairs bedrooms, those will start to heat a little bit later. So we're not heating all areas at the same time, at the same level unnecessarily. And of course, spare bedrooms and rooms that we use less, or maybe rooms that we don't use in the weekdays, they won't come on at all. It's only the weekend that those are affected. But of course, this can make a huge saving on energy. Safety, access control, door and gate entry, these are all possible to integrate. We can do present simulation, so lights come on automatically at the end of the day. And a panic function, for instance, if we operate a panic function either by voice saying, hey Google, I need help, that can send a push notification to a family member. It can open your gates, it could flash your outside lights. These are all things that could happen, and it's all programmable. We can integrate motion sensors, as I've said before, but again, from a security perspective, the motion sensors could become security sensors. somebody comes onto your property, the outside lights come on, but then a sequence of internal lights like the bedroom, the landing and the hall to give the impression you're now in and moving around. These are all possible. Automating outdoor lighting, gates and shutters, of course, we can do easily, and linking the intruder alarm and the fire alarm, again, bringing the fire alarm into the mix. If the fire alarm activates, then the lights can come on to illuminate your escape route. And of course, flexibility, because this is a centrally controlled system that is programmable, we can adjust it easily to based on changes of family situation. We can adapt the installation for elderly or single residents. You know, if your circumstances change and your needs change, or when you sell the home, it can then be reprogrammed for the new occupants who've maybe got a young family. So it becomes an asset when you're selling the house. And of course, it is going to get to the stage where people are going to say, is your home smart? You know, when you're coming to sell it. And if it's not, they may look elsewhere. So we're effectively future-proofing the property. Now, energy is big these days. The all-off function when you leave the house, making sure the house is in the most economical state. And that doesn't just mean lighting, that means turning the heating down, turning the tumble dryer off, and turning the dressing table socket off so the straighteners don't get left on. Lights could turn off after a lapse of time. So for instance, if certain people in the house leave lights on constantly, we could make it where certain rooms turn off after 30 minutes if you don't physically turn them off. And of course, motion sensors will do that anyway. So non-essential power consumers, like I said, the dressing table socket for the straighteners, they can be controlled. You know, when you press your roll off in the bedroom, like I showed you earlier, that can turn off that socket, so they can turn off automatically. And of course, automating blinds can reduce solar gain, so you then don't have to use your air conditioning to cool the room. So integrating heating and ventilation, making sure the ventilation doesn't boost automatically when you turn the light on in a bathroom, or integrating your heating for zone heating, like David mentioned earlier, so that only certain rooms are heated to the correct temperature at certain times. And we're going to prepare the home automatically for the changes in the energy transition. Gaining an insight into our energy consumption will automatically save us about 15% of our energy. We can be notified if there's high consumption, or if we've got, if we're limiting our peak consumption, we can save on our electricity bill. And of course, if we're generating more electricity than we're consuming, we can feed that back onto the grid normally, which is what we've traditionally done. But why would we want to do that when we get an absolute pittance in feed-in tariff? Why not make it where instead of feeding it back onto the grid, we use that energy to heat our hot water, or to charge our batteries if we've got, say, Tesla batteries in the home, or we can have the tumble dryer operate at that point. So we're using the energy we're generating rather than giving it back to the grid for nothing, or for next to nothing. So this is, of course, the you know, as you can see here, there's a few examples of things like we're going electric, whether we like it or not, electric mobility, all electric living, and then of course the smart meter rollout now. Dynamic pricing tariffs, battery prices have come down. And of course, we've got increased energy awareness now across the board. So having a smart home can help you save and monitor your energy automatically without even thinking about it. Like I say, going back to that all-off function, it's probably the single best solution or single best function that I've got in my house. And you know, it does save you a lot of money. So in summary, I'm just going to bring this to a close now. In summary, what is a smart home? Well, we like to call it the modern electrical installation. It offers many benefits for the homeowner, including comfort, energy saving, of course, safety, security, flexibility, and future proofing. You know, you've got one chance to get your cables in, so why would you possibly wire it the same way that we have for 30 or 40 years? You know, yes, budget is and can be an issue, but for me, it's about prioritizing those budgets. You know, maybe save on decorating or fitting out a spare bedroom that you're not going to use for another 12 months, perhaps, and then divert that budget towards your smart home installation. Regardless of your needs, the infrastructure is generally the same. If you get these cables in and future-proof it with, you know, take into account your curtains and blinds. If you don't want to go down the road of electric curtains and blinds, you could still put a cable in for them just in case. And if you plan early, you can understand the possibilities better. These possibilities can be discussed with any of the panel today, and of course we're going to take some questions shortly. But for me, it's not so much about the cost. It's comparing the cost against the benefit. We do that with absolutely everything these days, whether we're buying, you know, a car, or whether we're buying a handbag, if you're that way inclined, or if you're buying a bottle of water. I would be quite happy to buy some water from a supermarket, but I'm very aggrieved to buying a bottle of water from a motorway services that costs you £2. Comparing the cost against benefit tells you, you make that decision whether you've got value for money. And if you've got value for money, you buy it. But of course, we can match that to our budget then. And now we can just enjoy living in our smart home. Finally, what's the most expensive cable you're going to pull into your installation? Well, I think it's been mentioned previously, but it's of course the one you forget to pull in. So thank you very much for listening. I will hand back to Katie.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Andy. So that brings us to a close in terms of our presenters coming on and doing their talks. So the next part of our online surgery is our question time. So I was about to invite David back onto the screen, but he's one step ahead of me. And now that David's on the screen, if I could just also ask all the other presenters to come onto the screen. Spend the next half an hour or so, might run over slightly because we've had so many questions come in, which is brilliant. So hopefully you'll be happy to stay for that. I've made a note of some of the questions that have come in throughout all the talks. I know David's also down a few that he would like to cover as well. So please do feel free to submit them, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. And just a quick reminder that we do have these saved. So if we don't have time to answer your question, don't worry, I've got them noted down and we'll be able to put them to the presenters following this session. So without further ado, I will just hand over to David to kickstart the session. So I know he's got a couple of questions, and then I will come back with some of the ones that I have. So over to you, David, to introduce the question time session.
Absolutely. And going back briefly to what Andy Moss was saying about my 700 odd CDs, I refer back to also all these technologies. I have a slight issue. We bought a vehicle now that has gone beyond sat nav. You have to plug your phone in, and the motor manufacturer said this is the way to go. Why keep the mapping in there? Well, it's so good that I have to keep an AA manual under the seat, because when I go to Wales and my phone doesn't have any connection, I get no sat nav. So when I get no connection for my phone as well, I'll be taking out my CDs and plugging them back into the CD player. And this is where the problem comes in. It's brilliant to have all of this, except the day I want it, I promise you that'll be the day it doesn't work. and I won't be able to use my phone to phone you to work out what do I have to do to fix this. So that's the problem. So I like something that's going to work. Keep it simple. So yeah, I don't play the CDs themselves. They are stored on a hard drive, so I can access them. But I just get nervous when everything's connected. And I know one of the questions that came in is, what happens in a power outage with things like MVHR? Obviously, smart homes and all of that stuff stops working except for battery backup. But with mechanical ventilation, it's not only mechanical ventilation that won't work. Your boiler won't ignite. Your pumps won't run for your central heating. So power outages are a bit of a problem that need to be managed in, probably with battery storage, but then you won't be running all of your boilers and everything if they're electric or heat pumps from batteries. So not quite sure what Boris has in plan for that, but I think he's got other issues to think about before we get to that one. A couple of the other things that came up on MVHR, air tightness. Air tightness is brilliant. It is important for MVHR, and I'm sure the MVHR specialists will be able to add to it. But our property is not airtight. We put it in. We balanced each room rather than balancing the whole house. So we changed the design. Doesn't mean that just because one product can't work in your house that somebody else's isn't available that can. And once again with it, I like the idea of home automation. I wish I'd put more in, but it was quite disruptive. We only extended half the house. And I believe, Andy, that you've got a way of adding in now to an existing wiring system. Is that correct?
Yes, we do. So we have a retrofit solution which works on RF and Zigbee. It's the same platform, the same software as the bus cabling, and at the moment they are two separate systems, but very soon they will hybrid together. So it means that your new installation we would wire as a bit, the different configuration, the hub, the bicycle wheel configurations I like to call it, the hub and the spokes for the bus cabling, and then you could always add your existing system in with the retrofit smart switches effectively afterwards, and then hybrid the two together. But of course, there are other wireless controls on the market as well that if somebody decides to go down that road, if they've only got an existing house.
Absolutely. As you say, the most expensive wire is the one that's not in, and that's when Wi-Fi becomes worth it. Yep. Without the hard wiring. I'm not going to steal everybody else's time as well. Somebody asked a question about thermal imaging. I've got a thing called a FLIR One, which is a thermal imaging camera that plugs onto the bottom of the phone, and you can get them for Android and for Apple. And just make sure you know what connector you've got at the bottom of it, because some of them have USB-C and some of them have have the older USB on the bottom. So you have to make sure you have the right connector for it when ordering it. Katie, any more questions?
Yes, you've definitely got plenty of questions, Dave. So one that's jumped out at me, I quite like it because it says question for everyone. So it's from Iron, and they've written in, I'm at the very beginning of thinking about adding an extension to a listed thatched cottage. I'm hoping to build a very eco extension, and I'm now interested in planning a smart home. Where do I begin?
Start with the smart homes. Who's going to start? Chris?
Yep, so I just unmute myself. It depends what you want, really. We'd like to have a conversation with you and find out what you want to include: lighting, audio, video, heating, integration. It's based around what you want. So I think it's one of those things, if you could perhaps reach out to us, contact us, and we can have a chat with you and find out what you need, really, and help steer you as well.
Anyone else? Andy?
Yeah. So Andy from Zonia Home. So similarly, yeah, I mean, we've done a number of listed buildings, and just because it's a listed building or a very old building, then that doesn't preclude you from having a smart home solution. I can think of, for example, of listed barn conversions with 18-inch thick walls that we've seen successfully via a mixture of wired and wireless, and without any wires on show, successfully done. So it is possible. Obviously the new extension gives you opportunities for wiring anyway. But similar to what Andy says as well, we have products that can be retrofitted into an existing install, and therefore you can control your lighting and heating in the ways that make the whole home smart. So it's certainly possible. I think it's sorting out your wish list and actually sort of writing down what's important to you, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, if people want a smart home for different reasons, it might be for energy management, it might be home entertainment, or it might be for just the Wi-Fi and working from home and so on. So, or it could be a mixture. So it's important with any of the specialists that are on the screen today, is if you as sort of Chris said, it's about having a consultation, whether it be by phone or by Zoom at the moment, and actually just sort of saying, well, what is it I want to try and achieve? And then, we can all basically prepare what is the right mix for you. So I think it's having a little bit of an idea, but if you're not sure, you can still have that conversation, and actually, we can help tease out what's important to you by sort of posing certain questions. So yeah, it's just a mixture really of that to sort of understand what you really want to achieve, and also have an idea of what your budget is as well, because again, that has an impact on what can be achieved.
Yeah, if I can just add, guys, just to give you an idea, if you've got a smart home installation that you're proposing for an existing building. Listed buildings often have lath and plaster walls or lime plaster, and the last thing you want to do is have to chase. I don't know if you can see this. This is a typical example of a traditional wiring method for a 2-gang switch wired in a 2-way configuration. So you can see there's quite a lot of cables there that all need to be chased. And of course, if you're adding lighting, you're generally going to have in certain rooms more than just 2 switches. So you can imagine the scaling of these cables. If you're doing a wired smart home installation, then it's just simply a bus cable in most manufacturers, and of course that makes it nice and quick and easy. And of course you can very easily just swap and change things. So whether you're going the wireless route, of course, if you're going wireless, then that's one factor with the thick walls, but you can really make your life a lot easier, especially on an old building, using bus cabling. So like I say, most manufacturers have that sort of solution.
Were you ready for the next question?
Yep, let's do that.
Thank you. Okay, so this one was sent in just after 2 o'clock from Neil, and he's written, if you've not decided on a smart home installation yet, what's the minimum you need to do in a new build to make sure you are ready to accept it in the future?
Let's start in the same order that we went last time. Chris?
Yeah, it's a similar answer to last time as well, actually. It's the most important thing, like what Andy said when he finished his, the most expensive cable is the one you've not put in. So it's making sure you have the correct wiring infrastructure in place for what you need. So it's thinking about what your end goals are in the property to decide what cables need to go in, and obviously we'll help steer and guide through that and have an open and honest conversation with you about exactly what you're thinking of doing now and into the future, because most things run on similar cabling systems. So if you've got the right cables in, then it gives you the options to connect up what you need at the end of it.
Yeah. I think, sorry, if I could just add, we find a lot of people asking us, can they wire for both methods? And you wouldn't buy a car with an energy management system and also put a choke in it just in case. I think we need to really look at the way that the technology is actually moving forwards. You either do a smart home or you don't. In my opinion, if you're doing a new build, I don't see why you would want to wire it the traditional way and then try and make it future ready just in case you change it, because people won't change it. They'll live with it and what have you, because when they realize what they actually want to do after with more, but you wouldn't cut corners on your foundations or your insulation. You wouldn't wire for extractor fans as well as a piped ventilation system, just in case. You wouldn't put the pipes in and then fit extractor fans in on the thought of, am I going to change it later on? So I think there really does have to be that sort of commitment to new technologies, just like we have with all the other things we've talked about, in my opinion.
Andy from Zone Your Home, did you want to add?
I think, yeah, I think it is about that sort of just that sort of consultation. So I think it's probably been covered really by Andy and Chris already. So I think move on. But I mean, it's really just about making sure you've sort of thought through, and we can all help with that, because we've obviously seen lots of instances and use cases. So there are questions that we can ask you that will help determine what you really want to achieve. So I think it's just about getting that right mix of input from ourselves, of thinking, well, do you think this could be something you might want to do in the future, or is this a good idea? And then you obviously the customer can then sort of understand and see how they want to use the house. There's lots of things, like even with intercoms, is how do you want to, for example, how do you want to enter the home? Do you want to use a keypad? Do you want to use cards? Do you want to use facial recognition? there's lots of options out there now in all the technologies, and it changes fast, and we can obviously help by saying what the art of the possible is, and then you can decide whether that's something that's important to you.
And Brian, I know this question was really about smart homes, but when it comes to MVHR, it's the same really. The answer, isn't it? Really, plan early and don't try.
Absolutely, David. I mean, initial costing can be done, pre-planning, just so clients know what they're looking at budget-wise. But to the nitty-gritty, I'm allowed to say nitty-gritty? I'm not sure. To get to the design stage, as early as possible. So as soon as you've settled on a construction type, whether it's timber frame, SIPs, ICF, conventional build, that's when you need to get a design done. It can always be tweaked later in the process, but key thing is, particularly if it's a kit, like SIPs or timber frame, get it done early so the engineers know where ducts are going, through steels. I think you other guys be the same. You've got a hell of a lot of cables, and if they can punch a 100 mil hole through the steel for some ducts, you can get a hell of a lot of cables through that as well.
Absolutely.
I like to compare us in the industry as sort of chefs, if I can use that analogy. Just like a chef would take his ingredients, his onions, his garlic, his mince, and he'd knock up a nice spaghetti bolognese. We take the systems that are out there based on the client's needs, and we put those together to create this solution for them. So in our industry, the home cinema, the speakers, these are all, and there's all different things within these ingredients, do you know what I mean, that needs to be pulled together, but it has to be thought about, as the guys have said. So yeah, I do like to sort of compare us to, probably sometimes call ourselves smart home chefs, I suppose, to get the best dish. And of course, you've got in the industry, you've got in the catering industry, you've got cooks, you've got chefs, you've got Michelin star chefs. So it's really getting the best guys who are going to get the best combination of equipment, that matches your budget, that gives you that best solution. Not everybody can afford to eat in a Michelin star restaurant every week, but it's getting that happy medium, and planning early will help achieve that.
Thanks for that. Going back to that MVHR, Brian, I did have one extra question on that I saw earlier. Someone asked, what noise should they expect from an MVHR system? I know some of them, I've seen some that are very noisy, but what should we expect from one?
Well, hopefully you can vouch because you have one in your house, David. But the key starts right at the commencement of the process. So you need to get it sized properly first, and for the airflows for the house. Most noise issues result from that not happening, or in the process of the project, somebody value engineering it to something that may cost less, but is not actually doing the airflows when you come to balance and commission it. Thereafter, there are standard things in anybody's systems. We might do something slightly different to the next guy, but every system should have some attenuation in it to stop air noise going down the ducts. So other issues are, where you put things in rooms. So if you know the layout of rooms, probably not a great idea to put like a supply air valve right above a bed, for example. Sometimes it's pretty difficult, especially if you've got contemporary homes which are vaulted upstairs and you're pretty limited in where you can get your ducts around. But design is key, getting it sized is key, getting the components right are key. If you get all those things right and it gets installed correctly, it should not be intrusive whatsoever. And there's other things you can do on the controls. We have the daytime rate for building regs, which is what you need for fresh air when you're up and about and you're doing stuff in the house and extraction. But at night, do you really need that air change? So again, working with home automation, or whether you do it on a standalone app or you program it in, you can turn these units down to a lower speed overnight. So that drops everything for 6 to 8 hours.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie. Any more questions?
Yes, we've had one through from James, and he sent in, when is the right time to engage with smart home providers? We're right at the beginning of a self-build with so many unknowns in regards to budget priorities. I'm reluctant to waste people's times. I'm very keen, but if it came down to smart features or windows, I'd obviously have to lower my smart expectations.
Right, where are we going to start then?
Well,
Start
I'm happy to start with that one. I would say now, we often, as I'm sure Chris and Andy do, we talk to people and we meet people at shows and virtual events that they're still looking for a plot of land, but yet we start to engage with them. The earlier you can engage with a smart home professional, the better, because it's not so much about getting a design on the table now, it's about thinking about the possibilities. And as you get closer, it's not the right time to get a full design on the table now until you've even got planning permission, but you do need to start thinking about that so that when it is the right time, you've already started to build the relationship. It's worth noting as well that the smart home professional that you engage, they will be the first people you talk to, and they will be the last people out of your property. So it's not just about what they can do for you. You have to get on with them, you have to like them, and because again, they're not just going to pour the foundations and that's the last you see of them. They've got to commission it, make it work with you. So I'm sure the guys will agree with me that you've got to you will build a relationship with your smart home specialist. You have to, because it's a long relationship. So yeah, start early, definitely.
Yeah, I think if I can I'd absolutely concur with what Andy says there about being one of the early engagements, and also the last to leave the property, because it is, until everything is done, you can't usually finish commissioning the whole house and when every last piece of furniture is in and things. So completely agree with that. And also, I think it's worth pointing out that a smart professional will tend to have an enduring relationship with the client as well, because you want to make sure that the system is supported going forward. And as Andy says, comparing against a guy that supports concrete, is you're likely to engage with them again, but with a smart home, you will have potentially an enduring relationship. So it is important. I would also agree that as early as possible is important to be engaged. I mean, from the point of view that if you have just a very basic floor plan with a rough number of rooms and room size, then it's possible to give a budgetary figure for the wish list that you want. Again, coming back to the point that not everybody wants everything. So I think, you're absolutely right about budget being important, but it's also right that projects do tend to go over budget, and so it's important that you understand not the smart home bit, but the whole project I'm talking about. So you have a situation where as you go through the piling and whatever, that then you need to keep reassessing your budget on what's important. So quite often we would have the early conversation about budget. We get the system design done before your sort of electrical tender and whatever is done, so that any implications for that are known. So it's important to get that design work done almost when you're sort of going for sort of the building regs sort of stage, or before building tender. It's good to have that design done. I think there's lots of things that can happen, as I say, with a project and budget over its period. And I appreciate the comment about you need windows more than you need a smart home solution. But I think one thing that's been a common theme about the presentations is the fact of this pre-wiring, and the expensive wires are one you haven't got. So quite often we will do projects where we future-proof for TV distribution or for multi-room audio, but it's not fitted because of budget constraint. But then that will be done at a future date, or it's there in case it's needed. And that's quite cost effective, because pulling the wires at first fix is not expensive. Pulling them later is very expensive. So it's getting that. So there are compromises that can be made to ensure that you still get to where you want at the end of the day, bearing in mind that you don't know all of those unknowns that will occur as your build progresses.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
To be honest, not really got much to add to that. They both did a sterling job of covering everything off. I could feel a little bit wasted here now, but like Andy just said, it's both Andys. That's quite convenient. As Andy just said, I can cover them both off. Yes, it's an ongoing relationship. It's right from the start all the way through installation, and then afterwards, because if they want to change the system or make changes or improvements or add things on, and technology does move on, then we come back and support that. It is an ongoing relation. It's part of a fundamental part of running of your house. So it's not something that you have done once and then kind of walk away. It is an ongoing kind of relationship. We've got customers that we see potentially every 3-6 months, depending on what they're doing in their properties. And we get some customers we don't hear from or speak to in 2, 3, 4 years because it's just ticking over. But it's keeping the relationship open and making people aware of changes and things that come, because things do get changed and updated and superseded.
All right, so the next question, this has been sent in from Stephanie, and she's directing this question to Brian. She's written, if I have my letterbox on the porch door of my new build, will the air tightness test include the porch area?
I believe so, yes. So letterboxes in a passive house are a no-no. So yeah, it would be a potential weak point. Seem to remember from some of the shows we've done, there are things on the market such as passive house cat flaps, but I can't comment on how good they are. So whether there's a passive house letterbox, I don't know. But my experience of letterboxes, like anything that has to hinge and move, would be a weakness point in terms of air tightness.
Okay then, so for the next question, if no one else has any comments they'd like to make on that at all? No, okay, we'll move on then. So Yasser has sent in a question saying, we have guests and visitors over frequently, some quite elderly. A lot of this stuff sounds really great, but I'm wondering if there may be problems for occasional occupants not familiar with the systems.
Like my mum. Yeah, moving swiftly on.
Well, I don't mind starting that one. I mean, the bottom line is you can still make a room come to life with a button. How it comes to life depends on the time of day. So you can give that extra level of comfort. You know, if you go into a bedroom in the early evening, you push a button and it turns the light on. And then if you forget to turn it off, it'll automatically turn off. But if you press that same button at 10 o'clock at night, then it might come on at a different level. You're still operating a button, or what they would see as a switch. Sure, if you've got a super complicated screen in that area, then yeah, it's probably not the right choice for that room if you've got guests. Likewise, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are or how much of a technophobe you are, if I'm allowed to use that word. If you walk under a motion sensor, it is going to pick you up and then operate that room. Likewise, if you go out of the house and you press a button, you know, that could turn all the lights off. So it's more about the intelligence behind it. You take your car, you get in your car and you drive, but I can guarantee that most people that are watching this now, they've got all sorts of different settings on the car that they never use. They put the foot down, they drive, they hit the brake, they stop, they choose whether they're going to go left or right. But the car's making decisions all the time for them to keep their life comfortable. And that's what it's getting, that balance of not overcomplicating an installation whilst making it, you know, comfortable and easy to use. So and it's all to do with the consultation at the start, really. You know, some people like gimmicks, some people like it simple, and we can do that.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that as well, what Andy said, it is right. It's, you don't want to overcomplicate things. Sometimes you get people that try to make things overly complicated, and it ends up actually backfiring because they try to do more than it should do. It's keeping it simple, and things like our light switches are custom engraved, so you can have your own wording on it. So anyone that goes into a room to turn lights on, they can see the wording on the light, and they're backlit at night as well. so they can actually see whether it's bright or dim or whatever you might want to word it. And you can actually have one there that turns the TV on. And again, the remote controls that we use and other people use, they're intuitive. That's the idea, is to make them simpler, make them easier. So yeah, I think having a good consultation and setting the system up rightly and advising and using, everybody's got a lot of experience in this industry and installed probably lots and lots of jobs with different types of clientele. It's using that knowledge and experience to help steer as well from a usability perspective as well, because sometimes people have great ideas and some of them are absolutely brilliant and we like to embrace those, but sometimes they just need to be reined in a little bit to keep it a little bit more straightforward, and then build upon it over time. And very often what we do with some of our systems is we revisit after a certain period of time, especially when it comes to the lighting control, to adjust the scenes and things. Just once they've lived there and been with it for a while, they might say, actually, I don't like that button doing that, I want to change it. And that's fine. We go back and do that and make those changes. So it's a little bit of an ongoing thing until you get to a comfortable stage. But on the grand scheme of things, the idea is that the system is incredibly easy to use for anybody to walk into. Not like hotels where you have buttons and you don't know what the light switches are doing. You've got to switch that one on to switch that one on over there. It's all a bit frustrating. You got one by the bed and it turns the one off by the front door. No, the idea is it's supposed to be simple.
Yeah, if I could just add there, I mean, I always like to say that just because something can do something doesn't mean it has to. And likewise, what we're all getting at here is, like Chris said there, if you put this type of cabling in here, if you want to make a change, you've got to get your hammer and chisel out. Simple as that. If you want to make a change with a smart home, you can, just by simple reprogramming.
I think that one of the messages that's coming across for me, which seems to be in a lot of industries now, whether it be heating or smart homes or whatever, you almost need the end user to define what it is that they want. And very often they've got to do the research to work it out what they want, then let you guys work out how it's going to be applied, rather than trying to work out what are they going to do. The do is up to you. They need to work out what they want, because if they don't know what they want, they're not going to ever meet their expectations. So I think that's where it is. And one way to find out what you want is to come and do the heating course at the NSPR, because there we help you define things. We tell you what stuff does, but we help you work out what it does so that you can then make informed choices for yourselves.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of add on the switch conundrum of what happens when a guest or visitor comes, then yes, there's absolutely there are means where the plates can be engraved if you don't want that degree of sort of fixed in terms of what the button does, because as Andy says, it's possible to reconfigure what buttons do. Then we tend to go for sort of a convention. So because we can use switches from all different manufacturers, push button switches of all the major manufacturers, because the smart bit is behind the switch. So for example, the convention can be that every left-hand button, the first button on the left as you walk in is always the general scene button, and you press it twice and it turns the room off. And that's the only instruction you need to give to someone who comes into the house. Press the left button and the lights come on, double press it and it turns the whole room off. And to one level, that can be as simple as that. Also, if you've got a guest suite or a guest bedroom, then make sure that it's particularly straightforward in that room, because that is something that needs to be considered. But as the other guys have said, it's part of the consultation process to understand how you're going to use those rooms so that we can achieve that, really. Okay.
Okay then, so we're pretty much at time. So I think, although we could probably spend all day and all night going through these questions, they're absolutely fantastic. I think we'll just do a couple more if that's okay with you guys on the panel. Appreciate we're nearly at 10 past now. So one question that was sent in quite early on in this session is from David. And he's written, with CCTV on the front of the property, are you not potentially infringing GDPR? So I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that at all.
Yeah, there is, and I forget which part of the government website it's on. There is actually a guidance document on this. So when we set systems up, we're cautious. We're always cautious in terms of if there's any sort of overspill, we can blank out areas that overspill the sort of the perimeter of the property. So you don't want to make sure that you sort of blank those out. So there is that. The homeowner has a responsibility from a GDPR point of view that if for any reason there is any recording which is covering areas that are potentially a public domain, then they need to register for GDPR compliance. And I just can't remember what the web address is off the top of my head now. It's just gone blank. But effectively, there is a means to achieve GDPR compliance. But the best method is obviously to only cover your own areas. Make sure you've got the correct signage up regarding the fact you have CCTV on the property. And there are a number of steps you can do to make sure that you are addressing privacy concerns and making sure that you are compliant. So.
Okay then. So if that's the only comments you've got on that question, I will just find one to end on. So it's worth noting that a lot of the questions that have come through today have been on MVHR. So I think I'll just pick one of those to finish on if that's okay with you guys. But please feel free to add to this if you would like to cover anything else relating to this. So this one is from another David. And they've written in, what is the minimum air tightness value you need to achieve for the MVHR to run efficiently?
Well, David, you didn't go very airtight. Is the MVHR doing a job?
It's doing the job. It's balanced in each room. So on a whole house system, you need that air tightness. Yeah. On ours, because we kind of cobbled it together afterwards and used 3 different types of ducts, we balanced each room. Each room's got 2 vents in it. So it's balanced each room.
I brought David in because it depends who you talk to and what you read. As a general rule of thumb, I think an air tightness of 5 or under, you really should be considering it. Has it been used in air tightnesses of more than that? Well, yes, because I've been doing this over 20 years. And 20 years ago, air tightness insulation was not what it was then, but still very successful in controlling, particularly condensation problems in properties that maybe had some sort of upgrade. But certainly under 5. Regulations sort of in Scotland in particular allude to under 3. It's an absolute definite, but I will put inverted commas allude to, because building regulations very rarely are cut and dry. It's a question of interpretation. All I can say is most of the projects I've been involved in the last year or so, and I get commission systems as well as get involved in the in the design of them and promotion of them. And I can't remember anybody in a new build getting over an air tightness of 4. And I've even had renovation stroke extension projects which have come in at 4, which is it's a good testimony to the builder or the trades that have been working on the project. And I think that's key to air tightness.
Absolutely. Great.
Brilliant. Okay. So we've just hit 5:12 now. So I think that's all we've got time for really in terms of questions today. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone at home today who's joined us for both sessions and this afternoon session as well. So thanks for all the panelists as well for coming onto this to answer your questions. Thanks so much for your time, for answering all the questions that you've sent through as well. So sorry that we haven't been able to cover all of them. There's been sort of roughly about 200 of you guys at the peak of these sessions. So it's been great to see this engagement and know that we can all still help you whilst you're at home. I do hope you found all of these informative and inspiring, despite being sat in front of a camera all day. Hopefully we'll be able to see these talks at the centre again very soon. So if you have missed any of these sessions this afternoon, not to worry, we are recording them. We will send these out to you midweek in case you have missed anything or you just like to rewatch anything in your own time. We've also got a note of all your questions as well that you've sent in. So we'll see what we can do in terms of getting our experts to comment on these and send out some answers to you guys following our live talks. So just before we sign off, I'd like to remind you that you can still sign up for the surgeries that are taking place tomorrow and also on Saturday as well. So you can read more about these on the website and sign up if you would still like to do. You can also find some information on our range of training courses as well. As David mentioned earlier, we've got a Heating Your Home course that you might find interesting. We do run these at the centre regularly, and at the moment we're doing these virtually. So that's all still on. And if you would like to attend any of these events, we're currently running an offer until the end of January. So you can claim 15% off any course until the 31st of January. So thank you very much to everyone at home and indeed to our range of fantastic panelists again. It's been really interesting. So thanks very much for your time. We look forward to welcoming you to these surgeries over the next couple of days if you're signing up for those, and hopefully at the centre again very soon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.